Good morning, everyone. I am Vice Chair Delegate Janelle Wilkins. The date is February 13th, 2024, and we will begin our hearings for the day in the Ways and Means Committee. We are pleased to be joined this afternoon by Chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Luke Clippinger, who will begin his hearings on House Bill 591. You may begin whenever you're ready. You can press the button.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice Chair, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for hearing House Bill 591. I am Delegate Luke Clippinger, for the record, here to present this legislation. And as so many of you, I think, have already thrown out here before we started, why are you here? What are you doing here? We never see you. Why would you come over here? This requires a lot more conversation than I have, and normally I time people, and I'm surprised that I'm not getting timed here because you never let a lawyer talk forever. But one of the issues that we deal with in the Judiciary Committee quite a bit is issues related to access to justice, and some of the challenges that people and Marylanders have related to not being able sometimes to access attorneys is things go wrong. And one of the things that goes wrong happens when people die. Sometimes people don't have wills, don't have the appropriate documents to pass down their property from one person to another. This is a particular issue with lower income people who sometimes just either don't think of it or don't have the money to afford an attorney to be able to get the proper estate planning advice. And so when grandmother dies, the property goes through what's called intestacy. It's because there's no will. It goes through a process that's designated by law to the next person, and the next person, the next person in the line of succession that gets a property, in this case, a house. What ends up happening is, if at the end of the trail, at the last person who has the legal right to hold the house, they sometimes run into trouble. They may have a problem paying a water bill or paying their property taxes. There's help for people in all of those cases to get support to be able to catch up with water bills and those things. But if, because they went through the process or they didn't do what they were supposed to do in the intestacy process to be able to take custody of the house, they don't qualify to get the support to help pay their water bills, to help catch up with property taxes and things like that. And so here with House Bill 591 basically says that we want to make sure that that equity, that the property is transferring from one person to the next person to the next person. We want to encourage them to be involved with getting the services and the help that they need so that they can keep the property. And so in order to do that, we make it possible to effectively transfer the property from one person to the next without having to have paid the property taxes or having to pay the water bill, so that we can get them the support that they need to get the property moved forward to the next person down the line. To be candid, again, and I'll be very quick, this is not an issue that I personally deal with as an attorney. This is an issue that you deal with in this committee far more than we deal with in judiciary. But it goes back to, I think, issues related to supporting especially lower income people who need the help to be able to keep their property. We need to be able to dial them into those services that are available. And the only way that we can do that is if we can allow those people who have a right to the property, but have not gone through getting the title shifted from one person to the next, giving them the opportunity to take advantage of those services and move forward. With that, thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I am looking to see if there are any questions, and seeing none, that concludes the hearing on House Bill 591. Thank you for your visit.
I was terrified as to what was going to happen, but thank you all very much.
All right, we are going to skip over House Bill 627, which is my bill, and we will go to House Bill 636, which is an Allegheny County delegation bill with Delegate Buckle presenting.
Members of the committee, you caught me so fast, I didn't bring my folder, but people tell you this all day long. This is the truth. This is the simplest bill you will ever consider in the committee. Allegheny County for many, many years has had a structure where they have, we enable their county commissioners to include certain nonprofit entities on a property tax exemption list. The list, every few years they want to add or subtract someone based upon their operations. The Allegheny County Commissioners has requested us as the delegation to add an entity known as the Evergreen Heritage Center to the list so that they can grant them this property tax exemption. The Evergreen Heritage Center is predominantly a outdoor nature education and sort of environmental education facility that is maintained in Allegheny County, a few miles from my home. And they have a variety of programming there for children and adults to come in and experience nature and learn different things. It's at the request of the Allegheny County Commissioners to add them to this list, and we would request that the committee move favorable as a local courtesy.
Any questions? All right, seeing none. Great job, Delegate. Off the cuff. All right, I'm now going to call up my bill, House Bill 627, which is election law, automatic voter registration, state correctional facilities, and Delegate Eversole is going to chair. Can my panel please join me? Thank you.
All right, and you got a sponsor panel. Thank you. And you are Madam Chair right now, so you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Delegate, and thank you to the entire committee. I am Delegate Janelle Wilkins for the record, and I'm pleased to present House Bill 627, automatic voter registration at correctional facilities. What this bill does is pretty simple in the sense that it adds Maryland correctional facilities to the locations in which we conduct automatic voter registration. As you know, Maryland requires automatic voter registration for eligible residents in the Maryland Health Benefit Exchange, in the Maryland Transit Administration, and also at the MVA. This bill adds the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services to the list of agencies required to conduct automatic voter registration at the time of release. What this would look like is that when an individual is being released, that they would have someone who would ask them upon the process that is already in place for their release and the information they receive, if they'd like to go ahead and get registered to vote and help them to do that. In Maryland, you must be a U.S. citizen, of course. You must be a Maryland resident, and you have to be at least 16 years old in order to register to vote. And this is information that we know about people who are being released, and we want to make sure that they go ahead and get registered. I urge a favorable report on House Bill 627.
Thank you. Ms. Joanne Antoine.
Yes, good afternoon, Chair Eversole, and members of the
Wow,
committee.
that's a great ring to it.
And members of the committee. For the record, Joanne Antoine testifying in support of House Bill 627, which would expand the agencies under our AVR program to include DPSCS. Our AVR program has been successful, right? We've managed to register thousands of individuals since 2019. And I know that there are efforts to upgrade the program. I do want to make clear that this is very separate of that effort. All we're doing here is adding an agency to the existing program that's in place. And when the program was first established, one of the things that we looked at is what agencies have citizenship data where we know that someone is in fact eligible to vote, and where are individuals regularly engaging. So similar to an MVA, DPSCS meets those qualifications. And, you know, Delegate Wilkins championed the Value My Vote Act. And while it has been successful, right? Like we're still improving it. One of the things that were included in there was a requirement that a voter registration form be included in the packet. Now, it's great that it's in there, but just as any other voter, we know that the likelihood that someone actually physically brings a paper voter registration form to a local board or mails it off is very low. And someone who is coming home for the first time, even if they want to register to vote, you know, this isn't top of mind. So, you know, I don't want to be long. What we're doing here is, you know, ensuring that a population of voters who we know many times are unaware that their rights have been restored and who a lot of times don't have access to registration, we are meeting them kind of right where they are as they're coming home. So I think that this is a no-brainer. The fiscal note says that there is no cost whatsoever. And to my knowledge, EPSCS has not expressed any opposition. So with that, I hope the committee will move forward with a favorable vote.
Thank you. Mr. Gregory Brown, 2 minutes. Oh, are you Gregory Brown?
Oh, okay.
Your listed is on the panel, sir.
Yes, yes, I came up late, so.
2 minutes. You have the floor.
For the record, my name is Gregory Brown, Policy Counsel at the ACLU of Maryland. We are in support of this bill because it's good policy and it just makes sense. We believe that enriching this population, you know, with these resources will allow a historically disenfranchised population of voters to realize the right to vote and practice it as freely as they would like. So without repeating anything Joanne said, we are in full support.
Thank you. You're not listed on the panel, but I'm assuming you're Yeshua Downey, is that right?
Yes, I am.
All right, then as long as the sponsor will let you sit at the table with her, 2 minutes.
Thank you, Delegate Eversole. On behalf of Campaign Legal Center and at the request of Common Cause Maryland, I am pleased to submit this testimony in support of HB 627 to add state correctional facilities as automatic voter registration agencies. My name is Yeshua Downey. I'm the Restore Your Vote organizer for CLC's Voting Rights Program. We're a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization based in DC that works to protect and strengthen American democracy across all levels of government. Our program helps restore voting rights to people with past convictions by providing rights restoration services and empowering community leaders to understand and monitor implementation of rights restoration laws. The voter registration process is one of the most significant barriers to voting, and it is particularly high for formerly incarcerated folks. After a felony conviction, the rules for voting can be confusing, and many individuals believe that is a lifetime ban. In Maryland, your right to vote is automatically restored after release from incarceration for a felony conviction, and this bill would help activate that right and ensure that people are registered without any extra hurdles. HB 627 will make the voting process easier for formerly incarcerated Maryland residents by lowering the barrier and encouraging participation for those who are eligible. With this bill, people will be automatically registered to vote upon release of incarceration unless they opt out, similarly to what they do at the Department of Motor Vehicles. And Maryland will be a leader in voting rights restoration, being only the second state to adopt AVR upon release from incarceration after Michigan did so in last December. Studies show that voting is correlated with stronger and more successful reentry as people feel a sense of belonging and connection to their communities. All of us deserve a say in who represents us in office, from Congress all the way to local elections that determine who serves on our children's school board. Our democracy works best when everyone can participate, and this bill is a huge step forward in creating a more representative and more reflective democracy in Maryland, and I urge you to support it. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. We have a couple of questions. Delegate Buckle.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, come on, you can get to it.
But it hurt me in my soul. And I appreciate, you know, what you're trying to do with the bill, and some of it makes sense because we've changed the law about the eligibility of formerly incarcerated individuals to vote. But, we had some discussion about there are no impediments. And so as Delegate Wilkins likely knows, the two of the state's largest prisons are in my district. I know a lot of people who work there and they're not run like the DMV or social services agency. There are some real differences in how they do things. And I'm taking a look at what the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services presented at the end of their testimony, where they say existing applicable transactions agencies, which I take it to mean the agencies that are already included in the automatic registration system, have online applications in which a registration application could be included. Applicable transaction includes any transaction that is completed online. The department does not utilize an online process for prisoner release. As such, an automatic voter registration system would need to be developed by the department. So I take from that when they discharge an incarcerated individual, they don't sit them down in front of a computer and have the ability to log them in. That they'd either have to acquire the forms and then submit the forms somehow manually, or they'd have to develop their own interface. I'm not terribly techie, but that's, I guess, what I would call it. And then the last portion says there would be a considerable fiscal impact on the department as modifications to the offender case management system would be required in order to allow case managers to inquire about voter registration of each individual upon release. So I'm not really sure what the fiscal impact of those two things are or how they can be bureaucratically implemented, but it's probably not what you want to get to pass the bill and then find out the department can't do it, or the department needs $500,000 or $1 million, or I just don't know what that is. You had any thoughts?
Sure,
about
Delegate. Yes, thank you so much for that question, because I actually did talk to the Department of Corrections earlier today. And the way that it would work is that currently there's a case manager and a face-to-face sort of exit conversation upon release, where someone gets a packet of information. They're working on the various requirements that we have of them in terms of how an individual who is being released information have to be provided and the types of casework that has to be provided. Right now, that is done on a face-to-face, is done on a written. So what Department of Corrections shared with me is that they would need to make sure that they adjust their systems, their case management system, to be able to then upload and integrate the voter registration into it. The fiscal note says at least $100,000. And then it also indicates some cost for a contractual analyst to help with that. But this is a matter of just making sure that they can digitally do the voter registration there in person, and just adjust their systems to do that, which I think is very feasible. Thank you so much.
Delegate Hornberger.
Thank you, Mr. Temporary Chair. No, I appreciate the efforts here on this, and as you know, supported this over the years. My concern is that, as my colleague alluded to, this isn't a core competency of this agency, and really the folks that are best to deal with the voting are the Board of Elections. My question to you is, this notifies the person that was detained and being released that they're now eligible to vote. There could arise a scenario where something transpires in the future and they find themselves back in the situation where they're not able to vote. There is no notification for that, right? There's no automatic system that says, hey, even though you were given the franchise when you were released and you can now vote, now you've violated parole or been detained or committed a new crime, and all of a sudden now you're back in the cohort of folks that can't vote. And based on the guidance that they've been given, maybe they didn't get communicated the right way or forgot, they may now find themselves in a situation where they're going to vote or trying to vote. They've been told that they can, and now they're violating the covenant of permissible voting. So my question to you is, wouldn't it be better to put this onus back on the Board of Elections and either have a database or some way to notify a person who goes to vote this list or this this thing that I've been given here? It says that you are ineligible to vote at this given time.
Delegate, thank you for that question. That's an important question. I think your premise, though, is a question that wants to put the voter registration back on the Board of Elections. And this state has already decided back in 2018 when we implemented automatic voter registration that we're utilizing our agencies at the point that individuals interact with them, and where we have this information already that these individuals are eligible, that we make sure that we ask them and put them through the process of registering to vote. Now, in terms of those who are incarcerated and reoffend, we actually have done the work as a state around expanding voter registration in our prison facilities. That was actually my bill, the Value My Vote Act, where individuals actually do get information about whether they're eligible to vote or not because of that bill. We have drop boxes in our correctional facilities as well. Every single state facility has a drop box in there because of that legislation, and they are required to provide information about eligibility for those who are eligible, provided to provide a voter registration form in order to get registered, and so on and so forth. So I think that our state facilities are already equipped because of the work that we've done as a state to manage those who are eligible and to make sure that those who are receiving the information and sort of sifting through and making sure that those who are not eligible are not confused. So we do have those protocols already because of the Value My Vote Act.
Okay, so assuming that those safeguards don't work and someone votes again, unknowingly, without malice, they vote again, they're now on the hook potentially for another crime. So is there hold harmless language? Is there an attempt to prevent these folks from being involved in another thing if those checks and balances don't work?
We've been doing automatic voter registration with these agencies for several years now without any of those issues. So I think that these potential what if that has not, where there's motor vehicles, where there's Department of Health and Social Services, and now with Department of Corrections, I think that we're well equipped around that. And as you know, Delegate, for those instances where someone accidentally votes or votes twice, those issues are then pushed over to the state prosecutor to decide if it was malice or not. So we do have a process in our state around that as well, but I'll give it to my other panelists to respond.
Yeah, because registering to vote and voting are two different acts, right?
Yeah. Sure.
Okay.
And I second everything that the vice chair said, also just lifting up that there are very few incidents where Marylanders are going out of their way to vote twice. And I think just remembering again that if there's an incident where that individual finds themselves incarcerated again and they're not there, on pretrial serving time for a misdemeanor, they do in fact receive a letter from the court letting them know that they are no longer eligible to vote.
Okay,
as well.
that's what I was looking for. Is there some notification that says even though? Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Delegate. We that is favorable. We have two unfavorable people to testify. Is Alan Lang here? Yes, sir. You may come forward. We'll also bring up Nelda Fink. She can sit and wait with him at the desk. Nelda Fink, are you here as well? Okay, she doesn't appear to be here. Thank you, sir. 2 minutes.
Sorry for the delay. I didn't get an email saying I was going to testify, so I wasn't quite prepared.
It says in person here.
My name is Alan Lang from Anne Arundel County, and I would like the committee to vote against the bill. Essentially, the Public Safety and Corrections Services would be allowed to register, update existing registration of those being freed from jail as part of their checkout process. I don't know who would investigate if any false information is provided regarding address or citizenship. Why incur any added expense? I believe it was already discussed earlier when the releasees can register through the MVA to update their license. Also, when they register to get health benefits or register when they seek social services. There was no fiscal review included to show what the proposed cost of adding voter registration to this online checkout process would be. At a time when the state faces structural deficit, why incur extra expenses to add a new voter registration process when there are at least 3 other ways that these newly freed persons could register to vote. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. I'll check one more time. Is Nelda Fink in the room? Okay, we have one person to testify virtual. Are they on board? Okay, Jacqueline Coolidge, are you there?
Yes, thank you. I'm Jacqueline Coolidge. I am speaking on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Maryland. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, for the opportunity to speak with you. We have submitted written testimony already, so I won't read that verbatim. We have also been in discussion and agreement with our friends, such as Ms. Antoine with Common Cause, and we are in agreement with their position that the League is in general very much in favor of expanding opportunities for eligible citizens to be able to vote and making it as easy as possible to do so. We have been in favor both of the automatic voter registration procedures and the bills that have allowed formerly incarcerated people to be eligible to vote. We do believe it is a very logical process to combine these. This would just be adding another agency to the ones where automatic voter registration could take place. We do think that this should make a meaningful difference and encouragement for people, our returning citizens, to be encouraged to participate in the voting process. I don't need to take up any more of your time on this. We'd like to urge a favorable report on HB 627. Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no questions, then that concludes the testimony on House Bill 627, and I'm going to turn it back over to the chair.
All right, thank you so much, Delegate, and thank you for everyone who was on that panel. We are now going to take Delegate Polakovich Carr's bills, House Bill 479 and then House Bill 494. If you have a panel, they can come on up with you.
Good afternoon, colleagues. For the record, Delegate Julie Polakovich Carr here to present House Bill 479. This is a bill that this committee has heard in prior sessions when it was sponsored by former Delegate Kumar Barbe. He asked Senator Feldman and myself to carry on his work on this issue. And in fact, this bill has passed this committee and the House, both in the 2022 session and the 2020 session. So HB 479 extends the time frame during which a candidate seeking their party's gubernatorial nomination may choose a running mate. As it currently stands, the Maryland Constitution requires a primary candidate for governor to designate their choice for lieutenant governor on the day they file their candidacy with the State Board of Elections. But that current timeframe really puts a lot of constraints on who can be selected as lieutenant governor. For instance, this timeframe may actually prevent a gubernatorial nominee from picking the best candidate, for instance, one of their unsuccessful primary opponents. Many of these candidates offer specific expertise and experience that could help balance a party's ticket, forge party unity, and offer voters a strong and diverse leadership team. The current system also makes gubernatorial candidates compete with each other for their pick for running mate, even though only one of these LG candidates will ultimately be successful in advancing to the general election. So for these reasons, very few states have a system like Maryland's. We are one of only 8 states where the gubernatorial candidates have to pick their running mate before the primary. So if passed, this change to the state's constitution would be put before the voters on the November 2024 ballot. And lastly, I'll note that the Senate is already moving ahead with this bill. It has passed out of the EE committee with an amendment to change the time frame for selection. We heard from a local elections official that 21 days after the primary may not actually be enough time for the election results to be known. For instance, if you look back at the 2022 primary, the results weren't certified yet at that point. So the Senate amendment, which I've also submitted to this committee, changes the deadline to 2 days after the primary results are certified. That's when the gubernatorial candidate would need to select their running mate by at the latest. So with that, I thank you for your consideration and hope for a favorable report on this bill once again.
Thank you, Delegate. And actually, before we go to questions, you actually do have a person in support who signed up. Let's see, is Alan Lang here?
Hi, I'm Alan Lang from Anne Arundel County. I know you got a lot of bills to hear, so pretty much everything I wanted to say was already been said, and I support it and support the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Questions, Delegate Buckle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Delegate Palakovich-Cart, is my understanding correct? This would require a constitutional amendment. Would it require to be then put on the ballot this year for the voters to approve?
That's exactly right. It'd be on the general election ballot.
Okay. And is there any thought about the implications? I think I'm getting campaign finance right, but I may not. I know you're pretty sharp on those things. A lot of times candidates use their lieutenant governor nominee. They have the ability under our system to have a separate account. So you can have an account of, when we form our fusion ticket to run for governor, we can have, Palakovich-Cart for governor raises money, Buckle for lieutenant governor.
Right,
also
2026.
Also raises money. To put that down, 2026, we're coming. I don't think Governor Moore's probably that afraid, but you never know. Would that change this now? Because up until the time, post primary, there wouldn't be any lieutenant governor accounts, and that may have an effect upon people's ability to use that. Would it require, I guess, a collateral change is what I'm saying in election law to sort of impede those lieutenant governor accounts?
So I'll clarify that the legislation does not prohibit a gubernatorial candidate from picking a running mate. If they did so before the primary, that'd be their choice. The running mate would not be listed on the ballot with them at the time of the primary. So, I think that's one of those factors that a candidate would have to weigh in terms of, is there advantages of picking a running mate earlier versus waiting until after the primary or even closer to the primary, since right now we make people pick months and months in advance at the time that they file their candidacy. So that might just be, another consideration for someone as to when is the right timing.
So if I pick you, or in my analogy, you pick me, and we announce that beforehand, can I go out and start raising money as lieutenant governor, even though I'm not a formal candidate for it because I'm not going to be on the ballot?
If you were designated on the paperwork, the candidacy paperwork with the State Board of Elections, then I think, yes, then they can start raising money at that point. But otherwise candidates can't raise money without having a formal campaign account.
Okay, thank you.
Delegate Hornberger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Two questions. Again, continuing with the what if scenario. My colleague, let's say that I decided that I wanted to run for Hartford County Executive, and I'm ultimately successful in the primary, and then someone comes and taps me on the shoulder and says, hey, I think, you've already shown success there. I'd like you to be my running mate for governor. In terms of the calendar that you've aligned there, could I decline my nomination for Hartford County Executive and then team up with you? And what impacts would that have on that race that I just vacated?
Yeah, so there's already provisions in state law in terms of if somebody is not moving ahead on a ballot, like if they choose to run for some other office, if they get tapped to be an LG, if they die before the election. And I will have to circle back with you on what those exact provisions are. I think it depends on the timing. In some cases, the central committee, I think, actually gets to choose who the new nominee is for that party for that position.
And then the second question I had, if I may, in terms of transparency, if I run on a ticket and I say that I want to end nepotism, and then I win the nomination, and then after I win the nomination, I say, oh, by the way, I think that my son-in-law or my brother is the best person for the lieutenant governor position. Do you feel that if that were to take place, and I think we did have a gubernatorial race some years ago where someone picked their wife to run as their running mate. Do you think that would disenfranchise voters if that were to occur?
Yeah, I think it's a fair question about, if voters are not getting to pick at the time of the primary. But whoever we ultimately elect as governor and whoever voters are choosing to support in both the primary and then ultimately for the general election for that office are putting a lot of faith in that candidate to ultimately run the state and to make a lot of decisions. So, I'd say it's just the first test of trust between the electorate and that candidate and perhaps ultimately elected official.
All right, thank you.
Okay, any further questions? Seeing none, thank you. That concludes the hearing on House Bill 479. House Bill 494, Delegate Plavich-Carr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Still for the record, Delegate Julie Plavich-Carr here to present House Bill 494. So this bill seeks to crack down on entities who are engaged in fraud that is masquerading as political activity. Scam political action committees, scam PACs, are groups that claim to collect donations for a political candidate or cause only to pocket the money for themselves. This bill would provide the State Board of Elections with enhanced tools to combat scam PACs and to safeguard donors. And I want to start off by sharing two real-life stories from here in Maryland. In 2016, a resident of Catonsville created a PAC that advertised the chance to win a dinner with Donald Trump. The PAC spent a small fortune on Facebook ads and ultimately raised more than $1 million from 20,000 donors. But no one ever won that dinner with then candidate Trump, nor did he receive any campaign contributions from this PAC. Instead, the PAC founder used the money he raised to pay off personal debts, to buy a luxury car, to go on vacations, and for other personal uses. My second story is from Montgomery County and involves a more sophisticated scam. The Heroes United PAC claimed to fight for firefighter safety when they were making telemarketer calls. In 2018, it raised $4.6 million, but none of that money actually went to firefighters. Instead, the money it raised was funneled back into telemarketer fundraising efforts, a headquarters on K Street in DC, and to pay the salaries of the PAC's organizers. To be clear, the Heroes United PAC actually was a legally established federal PAC, but it was not the charitable organization that it claimed to be and as donors believed. And in fact, the only political activity it engaged in was a single 30-second radio ad. Such examples of fraud are unfortunately growing in Maryland and across the country. Both the FBI and the Federal Election Commission have documented the rise in scam PACs. Yet federal and state prosecutors and elections officials have had an extremely difficult time cracking down on this fraud under existing laws. For instance, the Catonsville resident who claimed to raise money for Trump was prosecuted not for fraud, but because he failed to file an income tax return. He got 1 year probation and had to pay taxes he owed, plus some penalties, but he still got to keep some of the money he stole from donors. The PAC that pretended to help volunteer firefighters reached a settlement with the Montgomery County Office of Consumer Protection to pay back just the donors from that county, to stop calling residents of Montgomery County, and to pay a nominal fine of $1,000. But that PAC got to keep all of the other money it collected from donors from everywhere else in the country. The Heroes United PAC went on to raise another $3.4 million over the next 2 years from donors across the country. And these are just two examples, but they're fairly typical of the minor consequences that scam PACs face if they face any consequences at all. The Federal Election Commission has called for Congress to pass new laws to allow them to crack down on federal scam PACs. That unfortunately has not happened yet, but there are actions that we can take here in Maryland to protect donors. And I'll note that much of this bill is inspired by the FEC's recommendations. This bill would ensure that would-be scam PACs are subject to appropriate scrutiny by the State Board of Elections and that the State Board can impose civil penalties for wrongdoing. Super PACs and entities that make independent expenditures would be prohibited from fraudulently claiming to represent a candidate, which mirrors existing protections in federal law. They would be prohibited from self-dealing with vendors owned by PAC organizers or their immediate relatives. And these PACs would be subject to additional disclosure requirements about raffles involving prizes, which Maryland charities are already subject to, as well as disclosure requirements about where their money goes. Collectively, these reforms will make it easier for donors to vet the legitimacy of political causes and will give appropriate tools to the State Board to crack down on fraud. I will note that I have submitted a sponsor amendment to the committee to clarify some of the disclosure provisions in the bill. And lastly, let me just comment on the fiscal note. We know that this year is a tough year in terms of finances. My plan is to talk to the State Board to see if there's any provisions of the bill that we could perhaps move ahead with that would not need additional staffing on their side. Because I don't dispute the fiscal note. I think actually the point of the bill is to have more enforcement and more personnel at the state level to crack down on these scam PACs. But we'll see if there's anything we can do to bring the fiscal note down. With that, I thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 494.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, I think there's one virtual witness for that bill.
She's not there. She's not with us.
All right, thank you.
That concludes the testimony on House Bill 494, Delegate Ruth, House Bill 638. Can we just take a step back? She just popped in. Okay, so I'm going to recall House Bill 494. We have one virtual witness with us. Bill 494, Delegate Ruth, House Bill 638. And if you could, Ms. Coolidge, turn off your live stream. And then when you're ready, you'll have 2 minutes. Can we just take a Okay, you have 2 minutes.
Hello, this is Jacqueline Coolidge, speaking again on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Maryland. Thank you again, Madam Chair and members of the committee. We have submitted written testimony, which has been uploaded, so I will not repeat that verbatim. And we basically want to support Delegate Polakovich-Carr and this useful bill. It is perhaps a sad situation that there are so many loopholes that seem to be ever in need of plugging up. We would wish for more progress at the federal level to ensure sound campaign finance and disclosure and so on. Lacking that, we are left with trying to support everything we can at the state level to try to make sure that fraud is not a part of our election system. Thank you very much. We would like to urge a favorable report on HB 494. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Coolidge? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. And now that concludes the hearing on House Bill 494. Now, Delegate Ruth, House Bill 638.
Push the button. Oh, there we go. Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm here with presenting House Bill 638. At its heart, this is an equity bill. It's about reducing wealth inequality, making housing a little more affordable for those who have less, and reducing the racial wealth gap. It will also generate additional revenue that can be used to fund important government services that Marylanders rely on that are in danger of being cut. The state transfer tax has not been changed since it was first established in 1970, over 50 years ago. So I think it's time to take a fresh look at it. The rate is a flat 0.5% on real estate transfers across the board, whether you're buying a fixer-upper or $1 million mansion. The tax is split between the buyer and the seller. For first-time home buyers, the rate is 0.25% paid by the seller. Flat tax rates put more of a burden on lower-income families because it comprises a greater share of their income. Real estate is a major contributor to built-up generational wealth, and because of historic and modern systemic discrimination, including redlining and exclusionary zoning, real estate also contributes to the racial wealth gap. Ensuring that the wealthy pay their fair share and that those with less pay less will help reduce both wealth inequality and the racial wealth gap. This bill creates a progressive, graduated rate structure depending on the value of the property. Families purchasing homes up to $400,000 will actually pay less than they would currently. With homes from $400,000 to $500,000 will pay the same. And above $500,000, the rates will start to go up. There is a different set of progressive tiers for non-residential property. And there is a chart outlining these in my written testimony. 7 states currently have progressive property taxes: Connecticut, Hawaii, New Jersey, New York, Rhode Island, Vermont, and Washington. 16 cities and counties also have progressive property taxes, including the District of Columbia and Los Angeles. In Maryland, Anne Arundel County has a 2-tiered transfer tax, and Montgomery County has a 2-tiered recordation tax. Currently, most of the revenue generated by the transfer tax goes to fund various conservation programs, including Program Open Space, the Agricultural Land Preservation Fund, the Rural Legacy Program, and the Heritage Conservation Fund. These programs are incredibly important. This bill transfers 33% of the revenue generated from the transfer tax to the general fund before the revenue is distributed to these other programs. But let me say, My intent was never to harm these other programs, to take funding away from them. Because these programs are incredibly important and beneficial to Marylanders. The fiscal note analysis did show that at the percentage in the bill, there would be a reduction in funding to these programs. And so I have already had drafted an amendment that reduces that percentage to make the programs whole. We want to make sure that we fund program open space and the other programs. If I hurt program open space, I think I would have to be kicked out of my own county. So I'll just say that up front. That's not my intent. As one final note, I did meet with many stakeholders and had some really productive conversations. So I was disappointed to see that some of them signed up unfavorable even after our productive conversations. I had hoped that after our discussions that they might at least have been favorable with amendments offering suggestions for how we might move forward. I'm always open to listening to concerns, to discussing amendments, and to working with all stakeholders. I'm happy to continue to do that with this. I asked for a favorable report, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Delegate Ruth? Delegate Griffith?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question. So I'm reading the realtor's testimony here. And so the realtor's assessment is this would increase transfer tax on homes sold over $500,000. And in this current climate, we've seen that a lot of homes that were typically 300, 350, very middle class, sometimes even lower middle class homes are now in that price range, not because people want to or can afford to, but if they want a home now, you're compelled. So this is really continuing to help price folks out of even basic home ownership in this environment. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, thank you so much, Delegate, for the question. And I agree that's a problem. And in my committee, we're dealing with some bills this session on how to increase the housing stock and make sure that we can, bring those housing prices down. I certainly am open to discussing whether we have the right level in the bills, the right cuts for these graduated progressions, but I do think that at some level, people should be paying more. If you're buying $1 million or a $3 million mansion, you can afford to pay a little more. If you're buying a $200,000 home, you probably need to pay a little bit less. So where those levels are, we can certainly discuss that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Delegate Hornberger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just two quick questions. The counties that also have, I'll just call it piggyback, it won't affect their rates or their
correct. This would only be the state rate.
And then secondly, the funds that do go into the open space, is that a locked box fund, or does the governor or the county executive have discretion to take funds out of that, put them back to general?
So I know in the past, there were times that funds were transferred to the general fund. I believe that something was passed a few years ago to protect that, or I can look into that and get back to you on that.
Thanks so much.
Delegate Hornberger. I'm sorry, Delegate Buckle. I was looking right at you. Sorry.
Listen, Kevin's shenanigans are evil shenanigans. So mine are, that hurts me. That hurts me. I have nice shenanigans. Thank you, Delegate Ruth. And just, I know you probably took a look at this. Where I live, a $400,000 home is a more upper middle class upscale home. But I was looking at MBIA and their remarks, the median household price right now is $411,000 in Maryland. So what you had said in your testimony was if the purchase price was below $400,000, it would be somewhat of a break on today's transfer tax. If it was above $400,000, it would be an increase. Is that your understanding of how the math would work?
Not exactly, Delegate. Thank you for the question. So under 400,000, it would be less. From 400 to 500,000, it would be the same as it currently is now. And then above 500,000, it goes up. And
an increase.
And I will say when it gets above 500,000, it's not a huge increase. And we've actually calculated out what that is. It's in my written testimony, but the increase gets greater, the greater up you go.
I just have a concern with us trying to encourage home ownership and the way the markets are tight. And I noticed what the Maryland State Bar Association said, and I don't know if this is still true today. They're claiming that transfer taxes in Maryland are the 5th highest in the United States. Do you have any sense of where we stand with respect to our neighbors?
I did see that and I don't know, I don't have that information. I do know some of the states that have progressive transfer taxes, the 7 that I listed. I don't have that in my testimony, but I can get that information to you. Actually, I think there's an article that's linked in my testimony that has that information, but some of those have a higher tax rate. The top tier tax rate is more than the top tier tax rate even in my bill.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Delegate Plavkovich Carr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Delegate Ruth, for the bill. I'm just curious with the sponsor amendment that you're putting forward, do you have a revised estimate of the fiscal note of what the bill could generate for the general fund?
I do not have that. I can get that information to you.
That'd be great.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you. Oh, sorry, Delegate Wu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Delegate Ruth. So one question about the bracket. How did you create such a as a house value bracket?
How to create them?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the difficult question. That's why I said I'm certainly open to to discussing whether those are the right brackets. I think that they're solid in terms of where they are, because with the median home prices up to 500,000, you're either going to be paying less or you're going to be paying the same. So I think most families, most working families and middle class families are going to end up paying the same or less. But again, as it goes up, you're going to be paying more.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no other questions, thank you, Delegate Ruth. There are 2 folks signed up unfavorable, Lisa May and Lori Graff.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Lori Graff, CEO of the Maryland Building Industry Association. We represent over 100,000 employees in the state of Maryland, primarily residential construction. I would like to thank Delegate Ruth. She has always been very willing to work with us, so we do appreciate that. We just have concerns about housing affordability and the thresholds in this bill. It is, we obviously want equity. However, the numbers in this bill just don't quite work. We know we have a housing shortage. This isn't just single family. This would also capture multifamily, which you're then getting into rent increases and those types of things as well. And we really just don't want to disincentivize investment in Maryland. NAHB, National Association of Home Builders, has a statistic that for every $1,000 you increase the price of a home, you're pricing 2,881 Marylanders out of that house. So that's a significant stat. So we're talking about, a couple $1,000 may not sound like a lot, but it really can make an impact on what people can afford. So with that, we request an unfavorable report. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Lisa May with the Maryland Realtors, and we fully endorse everything that Ms. Graff just said. We really just think that this is a wrong step to take for a state that is already struggling with housing affordability. Maryland is ranked 43rd in the nation in terms of housing affordability, and 82% of Marylanders believe that the cost to buy a home is too high. This is not going to help that effort. And while the state transfer tax rate has not changed in many years, the housing values that rate is charged against go up each and every year. In fact, according to our housing statistics, housing prices in Maryland have gone up 30% just since the pandemic. And many of our localities add additional taxes onto this during the transaction process, whether it's recordation tax or a piggyback transfer tax, or in some cases, both. Really due to the concerns that we have for people being able to live and stay and buy homes in Maryland, we must request an unfavorable report.
Thank you. Any questions, Delegate Griffith?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for testifying. Just real quick, and either one of you can address this. So one of the issues we've seen with housing prices and stock and affordability is obviously the fact that you can't typically finance a mortgage for more than the appraised value of the home. And obviously with the lack of stock, it's driving prices up. So cash is king. So if you don't have a 20, 30, 40, 50 grand on hand to supplement your financing, you're out of the market entirely. Can you speak to how this may negatively impact, in addition to the market driving prices up, the ability to even finance a home under some of the additional financial restraints like this bill would cause?
Yes, and Delegate, you are correct. This is part of essentially the upfront cost of home ownership. These are part of the closing costs that typically, especially now since the housing crash, cannot be financed because they don't allow most loans do not even allow 100% financing, much less 103, 104, 105% financing to roll those closing costs into the cost of the mortgage.
Just one more addition. Interest rates, as everybody knows, are high. So this just adds on to, you know, we're at 7-8% interest rates are at a much higher rate than we're used to, at least recently. So that adds to the closing costs and the costs as well.
Thank you.
Delegate Young and then Delegate Henson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I got a few quick questions. First, so and I'm new to the committee, so this might be some 101 questions. The tax rate, the transfer tax rate is 0.5%, correct? Flat. So the bill as proposed would reduce the tax rate under 400K, right? And we said that the median tax rate, excuse me, the median home sale price in Maryland is 411K. So for the median homes, it seems it wouldn't change. But the homes below that, it seems it would actually make those cheaper. Now, I keep hearing us talk about affordability. So is it correct that under 400,000, this bill stands to reduce how much it costs for a home?
That would be correct. I mean, but yeah.
Yes, and for a first-time buyer, they are already exempted from paying the state portion of the transfer tax. So really, there wouldn't be necessarily any break for them.
Sure.
Because it would still be zero. Those who were selling a home that was less than that might see a small break in the transfer tax that they pay. But those above would see increasing levels of taxation. And as housing prices increase over time, more and more individuals would fall into those higher brackets because they are not indexed to inflation.
Right, and I hear that certainly as inflation impacts home prices, that is a concern. Go ahead.
I was just going to say also, in addition, there's certain jurisdictions that median price is quite a bit higher. So it depends on where you are in the state as to the benefits.
So my next question, what is the median in Baltimore City? Do you know?
I do not know. Do you know Baltimore City?
I do not. Give me a second and I might be able to look it up for you.
If you can in 15 seconds, so my chair doesn't hold me to it. I think it's around 200 something. I Googled it. I just found, I don't know what the appropriate source is, but it seemed to be less than 300K. So, I mean, I'm just saying it to say, like, I understand the concern, particularly around the inflation. But when we talk about affordability, I think most of the houses in at least my district are going to fall, stand to benefit. And so indeed would theoretically increase a lot of the homes affordability in places that I represent and nearby. So just, you know, as you all oppose, I hope you all can take that into consideration. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, Henson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your testimony. In adding to the conversation on affordability, the bill sponsor in her testimony indicated that Anne Arundel County has a two-tier system. My district's in Anne Arundel County. And I know there we have, I believe it's properties that sell for over $1 million. We increased the we enabled it. Our county council then increased the transfer tax and started an affordable housing trust fund. And they've been able to get some significant revenues for the trust fund, which have supported the production of affordable housing. So I'm not wondering if there are ways that perhaps a bill like this could also support the goal of affordability. But my question as well, in the sponsor's testimony, she indicated that she did spend some time working with different groups. I'm not sure if your groups were included in that, but in that, I was wondering if there were amendments or anything that could be done to the bill that you would present for the bill that would be able to gain your support for it.
I have not, but we did not meet with the sponsor. But we've always been willing to work and we can try to certainly find out some middle ground. Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you both very much. And that concludes the testimony on House Bill 638, House Bill 459. Delegate Jones. And whoever you would like to bring up with you, you're welcome.
Thanks. Okay, thank you so much. For the record, I am Delegate Dana Jones. It's good to see you all. Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair Wilkins, and members of the Ways and Means Committee. Today, I come before you to introduce HB 459, which will establish a yearly performance review process for both the state and local election administrators and develop security protocols and standard operating procedures for election materials and machines. Fundamentally, this bill improves accountability and transparency for state and local administrators of elections. At the state level, in years past, this body has seen a lack of accountability over election procedures when concerns have been raised. HB 459's yearly review for the state administrator will help ensure all responsibilities and duties of the office are being executed. At the local level, yearly reviews by the state administrator of local board administrators will help local boards ensure compliance. Local boards of elections should be following SBE's policies and regulations in addition to federal and state law. However, with the complexity and level of detail involved for local boards, it can sometimes become difficult to become familiar with these details outside of what the directors tell the board members. So information from the state administrator will simply help empower local boards as they make informed decisions for their locality for both performance review and hiring decisions. As written directly in the bill, this assistance does not infringe on the exclusive authority of local boards to appoint an election director. Finally, HB 459 includes requirements for local boards to maintain a warehouse for voting equipment and machines, in addition to establishing standard procedures for alerting the state board of security violations. These provisions are crucial to ensuring state's equipment is secured and managed properly. Basically, this bill, it really highlights the importance of maintaining accountability and openness. Regular evaluations will help identify areas of both improvement, highlight success, and maintain accountability. So I respectfully urge a favorable report on House Bill 459.
Just for questions, Mr. DeMarinis.
Well, actually, the state board has voted to support this legislation. So, I just wanted to say thank you to the delegate for introducing this bill, and the state board does support this legislation. It brings accountability and transparency to the work that I do, as well as to the local election directors. It highlights the importance of that accountability and openness in following state laws and regulations, and it will instill greater confidence and trust in the electoral process and election administration. And the security methods are vital. It's the same sort of requirements that I operate under with us and notifications. So now that we have more control over the warehouses and that voting equipment is there, that they need to make sure that they're on top of that. And this is just making sure that I get properly notified of any sort of security issues, so that then I can pass that information along and adapt and keep it as transparent and in making sure that the accountability is there as well. One of the things too is just we removed a word, whereas that the local directors may do certain actions, to authorizing them, that they have to do those, mandating them. And those are what they already currently do. So there's nothing that is new for their functions with that change. So with that, again, we support this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. I see there are a couple questions, but I'm Delegate Jones, if you don't mind, going to ask Joanne Antoine to come up. Common cause is favorable. Oh, okay. And David Morrisberger, are you here? He's favorable with an amendment. And then we'll do questions. And then I know there is one unfavorable.
Okay, I'm Dave Morrisberger from David Civil, Maryland. So I'm favorable with an amendment. My amendment is basically remove kind of item 5 that says at least annually provide a performance evaluation of the election director of each local board to the local board, including any recommended disciplinary actions for failure to comply with laws and regulations. I 100% agree with responsibility and accountability. I 100% agree with the state board should provide feedback to the county boards, but when it comes to defining the disciplinary actions, I really think that should stay at the local level. Currently right now I've communicated with multiple ex-board members and current, and there's a feeling of being afraid to buck the state system. And I think this will just going to make it worse. And they're going to feel that they don't have the ability to do their job as they see fit within their county. They are the ones that are dealing with their voters. They understand the electorate within their area. So I think anything that adds more concern to them is not a good thing to increase the confidence of our voters in our election system. So I'm kind of in favor with just removing that piece of it that talks about, the state providing, levels of the disciplinary actions. Other than that, favorable for this bill. Thank you.
Okay, Delegate Hornberger.
Just real quickly, in some of the smaller jurisdictions like Cecil, seeing a lot of turnover with the election staff. So my question is, and it doesn't explicitly say this, but is the training reoccurring regardless on which jurisdiction you're working in? And then also our new staff that are onboarded, do they do it when they onboard, within a year? What is sort of the mechanics of that? Because like I said, we're experiencing a lot of turnover.
So yes, I can answer that. I mean, with the hiring of a new election director, yes, we would be a part of the process, but it would still be within the local board to hire. But we can give guidance as to what qualifications, what are the necessary, I would say, temperament and also skill set that is needed for it, because local board of are made up of volunteers or political appointments. We're kind of the subject matter experts that have that ability to kind of help guide them, but it's still 100% with them for their decision making. As for any training necessary later on, one of the things that's not addressed in this, but I've already kind of worked with Mayo and started to do mentorship programs. We are developing a educational program with for the local directors. So we're very much engaged in making sure that they're complying with state laws and regulations, because that's, we're a centralized state. So we're making sure that they're implementing the will of the General Assembly correctly and efficiently.
Okay, thanks.
Delegate Buckle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just really had a question about something in the fiscal note. And also I appreciate Mr. Demaritis being the first person I ever met who is supporting getting his performance more evaluated as a state employee. That's very commendable.
Yes,
but there's a line that says the bill also requires each local board to maintain a warehouse and to provide for early voting center expenses subject to state law requiring voting system costs to be shared by the state and the county. Does each county, I don't know if my county maintains a warehouse.
They do.
Okay, so each county is already doing that
Yes,
and we're just making sure that they don't switch and.
exactly right. So I mean, all your voting system equipment is already out there in every of the counties.
Oh, so when you say maintain, like I think we
Yeah.
just lease space to keep the voting machines there during
Exactly.
it's secure. Okay,
Right.
that I thought you were talking about you had to have your own county warehouse to maintain all the records and all that. stuff.
No, right.
Okay, thank you very much.
Delegate Griffith.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for this bill. This is more of a technical question, more related to personnel matters. So, I've ran teams, offered much corrective action, disciplinary matters for my employees in the past. On the annual report, it talks about recommended disciplinary actions for failure to comply. Typically, when we're issuing disciplinary actions or recommendations, these are on a case-by-case basis, based on a circumstance, not an annual review. So typically when somebody has a performance violation or a failure in performance, those issues are handled on the spot. We don't wait to the end of the year to offer a corrective action or to discipline somebody for a failure during the year. So can you dive into that? Is that a technical thing? Would you still issue that discipline on the spot? Why would we wait to the annual review to consider discipline?
Yes, I mean, it would be like, for example, like not notifying me of, say, a security violation, right? I mean, that's something that would be important. Not following specific procedures. Yes, those would be something, but I would also then notify the local board of that immediately of that. So it's just, it's a part of and then it would be a part of the performance evaluation with those failures there as well.
But I guess my question is, recommended disciplinary action in the report versus just making sure that's revealed during the report, because the way it reads, and maybe I'm overthinking it, but the way it reads is it creates an opportunity to not require that reporting, or it could be interpreted that way until the review versus it be included as part of the review.
So at one point here, the local board still has complete authority over the hiring and firing of the local election director. And we're not usurping that authority whatsoever. So the only thing I could do is then recommend. Now, there are certain things that as the state administrator, I would be able to say you're not having access to, say, state systems or anything like that immediately to address some of the, let's say, a security violation. But if there's an action that is required, a disciplinary action, yes, we would inform the local board immediately of it, but I can only make a recommendation at that point here, and that's what this is about.
I see. All right, I understand. Thanks for the clarification.
No problem.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you all. There is Alan Lang here? Please come forward. He signed up to testify unfavorable.
Alan Lang, Anne Arundel County, Pasadena. I'm against the bill. Given the disagreement that some of the local boards have been having with the state board regarding compliance with federal laws, such as the National Voter Registration Act of 1993, having the state board administrator review the local directors for compliance, seems like the state board is trying to squash any future dissent by these local boards. I believe providing input is okay, but I believe the performance of the local board should be handled solely by the local board. I believe, maybe someone can correct me, that the state superintendent of education does not do 24 performance reviews of the 24 local superintendents of education. The local school board does these reviews. Despite the disclaimer in section 202C on page 5, lines 13 through 15, I believe requiring the local boards of election to confer with the state administrator when appointing a local director is just another step in giving the state board more power over the local boards. The only changes I see in the bill are that I would deem acceptable are the security issues that are in section 2-206. All the other changes take away the autonomy of the local boards of election. Please vote against the bill 0459 or accept it by deleting all the stuff I just talked about in this, leaving section 2-206. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Lang? Okay. No, no questions. Thank you. Okay, that concludes the testimony on House Bill 459. Delegate Jones, would you like to come back up? House Bill 700?
Chairwoman. State Board Administrator is here for information as well. For the record, I am still Delegate Dana Jones. Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair Wilkins, and members of the Ways and Means Committee, I come before you to introduce HB 700, which will expand ways we can assist our local boards of elections with the recruitment and retention of election judges. You may remember last year, I had a bill last session. This committee passed HB 1200, which raised the minimum floor for election judges pay to $250 per day worked. And $100 per day work bonus in returning election judges. This was essential legislation as in the previous election cycle. It was widely known and reported that counties were facing unbelievable and significant struggles recruiting election judges. Just weeks before the 2022 gubernatorial election, Baltimore City was short more than 1,000 judges, and my home county of Anne Arundel was short 300, for examples. However, pay is not the only way in which we can improve recruitment and retention of our judges. HB 700 expands on last year's efforts with some new additions and a slight revision. First, returning election judges has been defined as a judge who served in the immediately preceding statewide election. This will provide needed clarity to local boards as they implement the new compensation policy. Second, we want to encourage our youth to participate in civic engagement. Recently, I am old enough to remember like the first Rock the Vote, and my feelings are hurt by the anniversary in years that has experienced is now it's pretty old. Anyway, to do this, the bill will allow public school students to earn service learning hours for graduation while also receiving compensation for their hard work. The incentives, this incentivizes our youth citizens to foster a deeper sense of civic responsibility and introduces them to the significance of this work. Lastly, as some of you might know, there is a long and arduous packet of paperwork required to apply, serve, receive compensation for work as an election judge. Additionally, this packet can vary in length greatly depending on the locality, and as a result, its complexity can be a roadblock to involvement. HB 700 directs the state board to adopt regulations that standardizes and minimizes the forms and documentation required to be a judge statewide. This will require significant coordination between the state and local boards. However, the state board is prepared and understanding of this effort, and they will take it seriously. So with that, I respectfully request a favorable report on HB 700.
I'm just here for informational purposes and
Delegate Jones, I'd like to bring up others that are signed up to testify favorable before we do questions. Gregory Brown, Morgan Drayton, and Nikki Tyree, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair Wilkins, Committee. This might come, just for the record, Nikki Tyree, League of Women Voters of Maryland. And I'm sure that this will come as a shock to most of you, but nobody signs up to become an election official for the money. And our theory is that if people are working for the government, they're already civically minded and engaged. This is simply an extension to allow them some administrative leave to participate in the democratic process. As Delegate Jones pointed out, we desperately need people to sign up for this role. Our elections depend on people doing that. As for the students, research and data tells us time and time again, the best way to get youth voters to continue to vote throughout their life or to become super voters is to get them involved as young as possible and to keep them involved. Having them weigh the difference between volunteer hours or money should not be a factor in participating. So we urge a favorable report.
Good afternoon, Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair Wilkins, and member of the committee. My name is Morgan Drayton, representing Common Cause Maryland. Not to repeat everything that Nikki just said, but yes, everything that Nikki just said. We know that election judges serve such a critical role in the functioning of our elections. And we also know that over the past few election cycles, state and local officials have struggled to fully staff our polling stations, excuse me. We believe that the steps outlined in this legislation will go a long way towards alleviating that issue, getting new people to apply, and also retaining those volunteers who have served before. So we and also the ACLU of Maryland are in strong support of HB 700. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Delegate Flackovich-Carr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good to see you, Delegate Jones. Actually, this is a question for the administrator. So one of the pieces of the bill is about developing a marketing campaign for the local boards. The fiscal note doesn't describe that. Is that something that you all think that you can do with existing resources?
It's already part of the existing law. So it's, I think they just drafted it and moved it to a new section. So it's there.
Okay.
Yes.
My mistake. Thank you.
That's okay. And,
Any other questions?
But that brings up a great point. I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. We do have Mr. Lang. Would you like to come forward for 2 minutes, please?
Lang, Anne Arundel County. I regret to say that I misread part of the bill. I am now a supporter. I'm a local. I've been a judge. I wish the federal government had allowed me to be off instead of using my leave to be a judge. So I would have been doing the early voting. But I had to wait till I was retired and could take 4 days and have 4 days available. So I especially like the part about getting the kids involved. So thank you for your time. Sorry for the misunderstanding.
Thank you. And thank you for volunteering your time to be a judge. We appreciate that. So that concludes the testimony on House Bill 700. Thank you, Delegate Jones. House Bill 563, Delegate Muir-Q North.
Okay, still go forward. Might as well. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice Chair Wilkins, and my distinguished colleagues on the Ways and Means Committee. It's my pleasure to come before you as Delegate Muir-Q North from District 14 to bring House Bill 563, which is providing language-related assistance for local elections. 1 in every 5 Marylanders speak a language other than English at home. And with the abundance of diversity in the state, it is crucial that we create inclusive elections so that every citizen is able to exercise their right to vote. This bill helps folks like this 90-year-old Spanish woman I met through a CASA event who was registering to vote for the first time, but has limited English capabilities. This is for the child that assists their mother or father who doesn't know a lot of English, just so they can be able to vote in an election. This bill lowers the threshold that's currently in place federally. If you have if you meet a threshold at 5% or 10,000 citizens of a voting age in a county that speaks other than English, you have to provide language assistance for the election materials. So currently Montgomery County and Prince George's County fit that bill. But in this bill, we're lowering the threshold to trigger assistance at least 2%, no fewer than 100 individuals or 4,000 citizens within voting age in a county that speaks a language other than English. So this will require most, if not all, counties to provide language translations in election materials. And with the bonus for Montgomery County is that would also add French, Cantonese, Korean, and Amharic. Now, this bill also is going to require the State Board of Elections to establish a process that allows for public input and review when determining covered languages and review of translated election materials before dissemination. It's also going to require postage of all voting centers and precinct polling locations, and in languages that meet the threshold in that county. This bill is also going to require a telephone hotline that provides nonpartisan support from an interpreter at the start of early voting to election day. So really, this bill is trying to ensure that we have a fairer, stronger, more representative democracy. And I ask that you vote favorable in House Bill 563. I would note that New York and Connecticut currently have lowered their threshold. So this bill will just keep us in line with those two states. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Joanne Antoine, Executive Director of Common Cause Maryland, testifying in support of House Bill 563. Also, apologies for missing the hearing before. Maryland should be doing all that it can to ensure that our elections are truly inclusive, especially in a state like ours where we've got some of the most diverse cities in the country and where we are the most diverse on the East Coast. As Delegate Miracle North mentioned, the bill includes lowering the threshold to include more robust language representation in terms of translating our materials. It ensures the translations are actually accurate, since we know that, many times there are different dialects of a language or the way that a certain word can be written for different communities. It incorporates the telephone hotline and signage in the language that individuals speak. All of these are best practices that are taken from other states. California is a good example where the interpreter hotline is available 24/7 during the election cycle. DC as well, they use their existing language access department to provide voters with the assistance that they need. I know for many, it could be difficult understanding how someone comes to the country, becomes a citizen, and doesn't fully speak English. I think my mother's a good example. She's from Haiti. She's started voting about 20 years ago. She speaks English pretty well. She can read and write it reasonably, but when it comes to voting, things like the ballot questions, which are complicated for even the English speaker, are things that she doesn't understand. I think COVID, the pandemic, also showed us that changes in processes, can also confuse the individual who is used to voting a certain way and who, again, does not understand the changes that are being made because it's not in a language that they can readily read. So the goal here is to ensure that voters are able to understand all the methods for voting and that they're able to get the assistance that they need, even if that means a one-on-one conversation with a trained individual. We should be doing all that we can to engage Marylanders, and that means making sure that our elections are run in languages that they can understand. So with that, we urge a favorable vote.
Thank you. Again, Nikki Tyree for the League of Women Voters of Maryland. The League has had a long history of believing that democracy needs to be representative, accessible, and equitable. This bill would do those things very clearly and very easily. This is not too big of a stretch. We have seen it done in other states. More than that, I would like to touch on the fact that many of you are hearing about the fiscal notes to things, and I understand that that is a concern this year. I would deeply, deeply urge the committee to not put a price tag on minorities being able to access the vote. And that is what this bill is at its heart would be addressing. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Questions? Delegate Hornberger, then Delegate Young.
Thank you, Madam Chair. These sort of activities in some regards are now being, supplanted with cell phones and apps, ability to read. However, I do know that you're not permitted to use your cell phone or to take pictures in the voting booth. So if you could just clarify for me, if there's a situation where someone is trying to translate the ballot and they want to use their cell phone, are they prohibited from doing so, or is that permissible under current law?
Yes. So voters, even though we know that many times they do it, they are not supposed to use their phones in polling locations. We discourage it. There are privacy and security concerns all around. Voters are able to bring in someone to assist them with understanding their ballot. But again, using your phone just isn't an accessible way either, because we know that there are individuals who don't have smartphones, don't have access to the internet, and so forth. And again, I think keeping in mind, just as here, there's education gaps as well. So I work with individuals all the time who are voting in our elections, but they can't readily read and write either. So that is where the interpreters come in.
Okay, certainly straightens your, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm kind of in the same spot that Delegate Hornberger is in. I look at, and I understand that you can't necessarily rely on everybody having the technology, but I do think that the technology exists today and its accessibility is increasing rapidly where translation services are in your hands. So I would just ask, I guess, whether we would also look at maybe even thinking about amending that law so people can use their phones, but then also potentially what type of training we might want to do for election judges to help them show people and make sure they know how to use that technology and show people, because I understand the fiscal note, and I do think that the fiscal note is actually probably needs to come down to a degree because for the same reasons that the technology would exist even for the people that's built up in this structure. But so I guess my question specifically is, would that be something we would want to look at, or y'all would be open to looking at? Is that specifically the training that could go to election judges so that that skill set could be accessible at the polling place?
I can jump in here too. I mean, I think two things, remembering that as a state, we already have difficulty recruiting election judges, and that includes judges who speak more than one language. Montgomery County a lot of times has difficulty, ensuring that on election day, for example, where we've got hundreds of precinct polling locations, that there are Spanish speakers there. So while we can train the judges to maybe point to a sign, letting the voter know that assistance is available, there's no quick way to train someone on how to communicate I keep using Haitian Creole, but in Haitian Creole, to effectively communicate with that voter. I'm sorry, it looked like you were going.
I was going to say, I actually think the technology can handle dialects and even Creole and Patois and, all the different dialects in India and Hindu and Chinese. I mean, I think it's getting to that point.
So I think that is where with the technology piece, and again, I can look into this, but at least for our organization, there's always going to be security concerns. I know that there's been bills before this committee where we talked about allowing for cell phone usage because people wanted to be able to pull out sample ballots as an example, and just concerns around taking photos while you're at the polls, right? And managing to capture someone else's pictures of their ballots. And then we've got overall security concerns for our election officials who are sharing stories about being doxxed, for example. So, the individual using their phone is concerning. But as for technology, we can look into it. But again, the technology needs to be secure. It needs to be in a way where it doesn't, I don't know the correct terminology, but it doesn't in any way impact our election processes and puts our elections, at risk.
So one just piece of comment, which is, I agree with those concerns. I think that we could maybe look at it from a standpoint of like a reasonable accommodation, how we do those. It could be a similar transferable assessment. But thank you for your answer. Thank you, Madam Chair.
We could look into it.
Okay, seeing no further questions, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
And Mr. Lang, you are signed up to testify.
Logan, Alan Lang, Anne Arundel County. This bill could be costly to the state and local boards as they may need to print instructions, signage, ballots in one or more foreign languages, as well as to try and hire foreign-speaking judges when finding sufficient number of English-speaking judges is often difficult. There's no fiscal review provided when I reviewed this, estimating the cost of these proposed requirements. My biggest concern is this bill sets up a process for an individual or an ethnic group organization such as CARE to sue the boards if sufficient foreign language materials are not provided. Section 15.5-106 on pages 5 and 6. The state board could also sue the local board if the local board refuses to supply foreign language materials it believes are not needed, and the local board may sue the state board if it believes only English language should be done. The job of the local boards to hold elections and obtain sufficient volunteers to be workers is daunting enough. Please do not add any more administrative burden to the boards and create a process that could potentially involve suits against these boards. An old cliche is the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Please vote against this bill despite its good intentions.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Lang? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the hearing on House Bill 563. House Bill, it's the Delegate Long Show. And well, Delegate Hartman's not here, but he said all these bills will be long, but bump. Okay, he's trying to give him credit for his joke, but he's not even hearing. Okay, so we.
I will not dance, Madam Chair. Is it all right if I invite my panel?
Yes, sir. And we are starting with House Bill 164, I believe.
I'm waiting for my panel.
Okay.
I can sing. No, you don't want to hear me sing. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Vice Chair, for being here today and listening to these bills. For the record, I'm Delegate Bob Long. I'm here to testify on election voter registration list absentee ballot Transparency Act of 2024. Basically, what we're requesting that the State Board of Elections in a timely manner provide anyone that wants to pay for the information for absentee ballot list and or phone numbers, emails, etc. in a timely manner, because the way the absentee ballots work, it's hard to be able to reach out to people because of the way that the process is. It's so fast. You might get an absentee ballot today and you might process it tomorrow. So in order to actually be effective and reach out to voters, we need to make sure that they are, we can reach out to them, give them all the information, whether they like us or not. I think that's our right to be able to speak to voters before they vote in absentee ballots. Right now, I have requested before a list of ballots, absentee ballots, with phone numbers and email addresses, and I was refused. I find that very disheartening. I'm not a telemarketer. I'm not going to threaten them. I just want to be able to call them and let them know, from my advantage, or from my perspective, what we want to do. And I think we need to make sure our voters are educated as much as possible. And I think this is the first step to make sure that that takes place. I would ask for a favorable vote, and thank you very much.
Hello, David Morrisberger and Davidson, Maryland. And everyone here on the Ways and Means Committee knows, it's very hard to reach out to voters prior to election and stay in contact with all of your constituents once you have the privilege to hold office. It is getting harder and harder in Maryland to gain and maintain contacts as the state population grows, as people move in and out of Maryland because it's a very transient state, and as people communicate online and cell phones and communicate more online with email, cell phones. So providing the email address and telephone numbers will greatly help the candidates and election officials stay in touch with their voters and constituents. Finally, it goes without saying that candidates and office holders must strictly follow opt-out rules that you must follow with things like emails and cell phone and texting. So you must do that. And you must not use any of these lists, like any of the lists that you get from the state, for commercial purposes. So with that, I ask you to please vote in favor of HB 164 so that people can stay in contact with their voters and constituents. And welcome any questions.
Alan Lang, Anne Arundel County, Pasadena. I agree with most of what David said. I also thought that obtaining these roles for people seeking election would also be improvement, because having these absentee ballots, those who've requested an absentee ballot, gives you an idea who thinks they want to vote, so that you can get your message out to them instead of having to send it to everybody on the rolls. It allows you to target your audience better. And I know for me personally, I would deal with I don't answer my landline at all. I know a lot of people don't have landlines anymore, sometimes even my cell. But I would like to have if someone sent me an email, I would certainly discuss that and would respond to that. So I believe that in addition to those who are already holding office, those seeking offices can also use this information to help them in their campaigns and would benefit both parties. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ella Ennis, and I'm here for the Maryland Federation of Republican Women, and we strongly support House Bill 164 to have the Board of Elections provide the telephone numbers and emails of the voters when a candidate asks for a list of absentee voters. This information is really extremely important to candidates, but it's particularly important for local candidates. Local candidates will be able to contact more voters, introduce themselves, and provide information on their candidacy. These local candidates very often do not have the funds necessary to mail to all voters, and the literature that they can to provide them literature. So it's very valuable for them to contact voters by telephone or email and increase their name recognition and answer questions of the voters. Equally important, the contacts increase the voters' capacity to make an informed decision on whom to vote for when they could decide on a preferred candidate for office. So competition in elections enhances democracy, and it makes it easier for candidates to contact voters, will encourage more citizens to come out and vote. And it would also encourage more people to consider the feasibility of running for office. So we urge your favorable report of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you. That concludes the hearing on House Bill 164. Delegate Long, House Bill 142.
Yeah. 42, okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, Delegate Bob Long, here to testify on, hold on for a second, I got a lot of bills. HB 142, this is Voter Identification, Voter Privacy Act. Right now, if you want to go into a polling place and show your ID, they won't accept it. You have to give them your name, address, and or whatever information, I think date of birth, or show. Anyway, my concerns is that if someone doesn't want to give them that information because of someone standing behind them or whatever, that's why we would like to have the election judges accept this type of ID. This will keep privacy, keep a personal privacy for people. And I've worked many of polls, many of different elections, and I've had many people come in and say, Bob, I've showed them my ID, they won't accept it. But yet I've got to tell them all my information. Some people feel uncomfortable. So this would just allow, if a voter wanted to show an ID, that they could. And that's what this bill entails. Thank you.
Thank you. Alan Lang, Anne Arundel County, Pasadena. Many people are concerned about people obtaining their personal information. When one checks in to vote, one is asked to provide name and address. Once the record is found, the voter is then asked to provide month and day of birth to confirm their ID. Some people would rather not say this information out loud, or others have to repeat things often because their name is hard to spell or hard to pronounce, and they get frustrated trying to where they get this, here's my driver's license, take the information off. Also, it could help prevent errors in people that have, might be junior, senior, or people who have, I know there's some neighbors who have their house only differs by 1 or 2 digits. By handing it out, they might have a better idea of who's actually the one here and not make an error requiring someone to vote provisionally. So this bill would help prevent, would go a long way to helping people who go through the process quicker and with less mistakes. And I urge you to support this bill.
Hello again, Dave Morrisberger, Davidsonville, Maryland. So I got a theme here. It's voting is sacred and confidence is low. It's a bad mix. As a past election judge for multiple elections, I have witnessed voters handing their driver's license to the judge during check-in. The check-in judge, to include myself at a check-in table, had to tell the voter we cannot accept the ID and they must verbally give their name, month and day of birth, not their year, and address. In a majority of the cases, the voter was not happy. And you heard it right here where the voters come out and tell you how they wouldn't accept this. They weren't happy. So kind of providing this is just an option for a voter to give their approved ID to the check-in judge, I think will make a more pleasing voting experience and increase the confidence in the overall election system, which I think is very critical, especially in current situation and environment. So I request that you vote in favor of HB 142 and welcome any questions. Thank you.
The Maryland Federation of Republican Women strongly supports having voter ID to vote. And I would like to give you an example of what happened in 2016 in Calvert County. We had during early voting, a lady came to vote. And then, on election day, a person with the same first name and the same last name came to vote and was told she had voted during early voting. And it was only when the Board of Elections, the woman had to do a provisional ballot. And it was only when they checked the signature cards that they found that the first woman had a different middle initial than the lady who came on election day. But had they shown a voter ID, a photo ID, the election judge would have been much less likely to have made that mistake. So we could have had a person denied their right to vote simply because the election judge did not either hear it correctly, or when she went to, she or he went to check it on the computer, they checked the wrong person. Because of the difference in early voting, you have all the voters' names on your voter roll because you only have one voting place. Whereas during a general election day, you have 24 precincts and you only see the people in that precinct. So this bill would be helpful in clearing up that problem. So we support it. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kate Sullivan. I'm a Baltimore County registered voter. I'll save my my soapbox about a voter ID for the next bill, but not to belabor, I think everyone's made some excellent points. The main concern that I have is voter confidence in our election processes, and voter ID having the ability to present that voter ID, which, like David, I've seen many voters turned away. They act like, this is a really terrible thing to be giving the ID to an election judge. We need to promote the idea that people are giving voter ID because it will restore confidence in our election. People like to show their ID and know that everyone knows that they are who they say they are. Also, it allows them to do it quietly. Like Bob Long has pointed out, people sometimes don't want to list their name and address out openly and out loud. It allows them to do it quietly. So we really are strongly in favor of HB 142 for those reasons.
Thank you. Is Nelda Fink here? If you could if someone could step back and let Ms. Fink testify. And then Delegate Long, you have one in support who is virtual. And then we'll take questions.
Hi, my name is Nelda Fink. I'm from Millersville, Maryland. Committee, thank you for this opportunity to improve our elections. I agree with the concepts of this bill, but would actually prefer HB 192 to take precedent. However, I would like to point out that establishing the voter's ID, the judge must also verify the driver's license being used is a federally compliant real ID. If it is not, the voter's integrity should be questioned because Maryland issues driver's license to immigrants. But according to the MVA documentation, it will be a non-compliant card. I myself do not know what the differences are. So the judge needs to know the difference and stop any voting of an individual who does not have a real ID and handle that situation properly, which is actually better outlined in HB 192. Thank you.
Thank you. And is Jay Kaminsky with us virtually?
I am. I'm here.
Okay, we can't see you.
I don't know how to correct that.
There you
Okay.
Yep, perfect. 2 minutes.
Sorry. I'm a Frederick County, Maryland resident. I'm in favor of passing Bill 142 to implement a voter ID requirement for in-person voting. As some of you are aware, Maryland is only one of 15 states to have no voter ID requirement at all, which jeopardizes both the security of all and confidence in our election. Voter ID is critical to election and security. Under current policy, individuals wishing to vote in Maryland election need only to supply their name, address, date of birth when checking in at a polling place. This process is not sufficiently secure. It would be easily, for instance, for anyone who knew the information about a spouse, friend, or colleague to present this information and vote on their behalf. And unfortunately, this kind of voter impersonation is only easier in our digital information age, where personal information is also often hacked and published on sites like Spokeo for all to see, sometimes at a nominal fee and sometimes with no restrictions at all. The requirement of a voter ID also does not appear to dissuade voters in any meaningful way from voting for any other reason. In spite of Maryland's recent efforts to expand voter participation, such allowing on same-day registration, our voter turnout is way down. Regardless of sentiments in both parties that the 2022 midterm elections were of vital importance, voter turnout was down 16% compared to 2018, when security standards were higher. In contrast, Georgia, who enacted voter ID requirements in 2021, saw their largest midterm turnout in state's history, suggesting that voters were more likely to vote when they're confident and their elections were secure. Maryland, in general, takes secure identification very seriously. In 2005, Congress enacted the Real ID Act. Maryland was one of the first states in the country to comply, and I'm very much in favor of this, and my time is up. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Are there any questions from the committee for any of the witnesses? Okay, seeing none, thank you. That concludes the hearing on House Bill 142. Delegate Long, House Bill 192.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And for the record, I'm Delegate Bob Long. I'm here on House Bill 192, election in-person voting proof of identification. And the reason I brought all these election law bills is because when we were all first elected, we took a sworn oath. That was to protect and defend our Constitution. And right now, we are being, I believe, we're divided. And the reason we're being divided is because of the integrity of our election laws. What we want to do is bring clear, open, and fair elections to Maryland and throughout the country. I believe that a voter ID would help ensure voters that they would have more confidence in what's happening in a voter when they vote. We hear stories. I can't go back and I mean, it's been a lot of stories about people voting, changing some IDs, some things of that nature, and this will just help strengthen our system. It would also encourage voters to come out, because I know I talked to a lot of different voters. Bob, I'm not coming out to vote. Why? No sense. It's rigged. Okay. Well, that's their opinion. They have a right to that opinion. So it's our job to support our Constitution and make sure that we can give these people the confidence that it brings them, to bring them out to vote. Well, thank you.
Kate Sullivan again. I've spent the better part of the last 3 years speaking with registered voters and analyzing our official state voter rolls to identify inaccuracies, of which there are many on our rolls. It is very, very clear to me that voter ID is the most basic election reform a state can make to increase the security and accuracy of our elections. 80% of Americans support requiring voters to show photo identification. This is an opportunity for all of us to restore the confidence that has been lost in recent years of our election processes. Legislators go against the will of the people when they vote against voter ID. I think that's really important to remember here. It is a very popular, both sides, both parties like it. There's no evidence voter ID requirements deter citizens from voting. And recently, in a statewide canvass, we identified 20 voters who were listed as having voted on voter rolls, yet when spoke to them, they said they didn't vote. Voter ID would help restore confidence that those who are voting are indeed voting. There is evidence to suggest states with stricter voter ID requirements enjoy higher voting rates. In the event of election crime investigations, it's harder to prove double voting is happening across state lines when a state does not require proof of identity. Voter ID also speeds up the election check-in and reduces long lines. We can all agree that we only want legal votes to count. With voter ID, we can help voters trust that everyone voting is who they say they are, while at the same time improving election administration. We urge favorable report on HB 192.
Let me go next. Again, Ella Ennis for the Maryland Federation of Republican Women, and we strongly support having voter ID to vote. And some of the reasons that I think that we need to keep in mind is that one vote can make a difference. And in certain elections, if you go back to 1976, Gerald Ford lost the presidential election by less than one vote per precinct in the country. In 2022, in the Montgomery County election, in the primary election for county executive, there were 141,582 votes cast, and the election was decided by 35 votes. In Calvert County in 1994, Tony O'Donnell was elected to the House of Delegates by 32 votes, and former delegate Jerry Clark was elected to the county commissioners in 1992, I think it was, by 15 votes. So making sure that every person who comes in to vote is actually the registered voter is very important, and showing a photo ID, government issued photo ID, helps to ensure that we don't have unintentional errors, as the case that I mentioned under House Bill 142, and it prevents a person from deliberately voting in place of a valid voter. These are all really important reasons to ensure that our voters have confidence in the election, that only people who are eligible to vote are voting, and that the results of every election are correct. And we'd urge you a favorable report on this bill. Thank you.
Hello again, David Morseberger, David Seville, Maryland. Again, voting is sacred and confidence is low, and Kate did a great job with that. It's a bad mix. This is not a partisan issue, as there is low confidence across all parties, and the sad part is that low confidence is growing. Currently, the mindset within the elections office is ease of voting over accuracy of voting. And you can see that in like some of the bills here, like later curbside voting. I am a UMCP, University of Maryland College Park engineer, go Terps, working in cyber defense and cybersecurity as an executive. One thing that we do is we assume there are vulnerabilities, and our focus is on finding them and fixing them before they are exploited. I mean, that's what you do in cybersecurity. We have red teams whose job it is they try to exploit. We have blue teams whose job it is to determine that somebody's trying to exploit of known or unknown vulnerability. We must all in a nonpartisan way take the same approach to our sacred voting process. We must change the voting security mindset that is analogous to the cybersecurity. We as a society will never regain confidence in our election system if we do not do that. A voter ID, like is in here for in-person voting, I think is a great step forward in implementing that voter security mindset. We must assume, I mean, this is key. You must assume there are individuals who are trying to take advantage of these vulnerabilities that exist. In this case, knowing a person's name, the month and day, like I said earlier, not year of birth, and address. For $125, I can go by a state voting list, and I'll be finished 1 second, and determine that information of a voter. It's readily available. So I request, plead,
Thank
you vote in
you.
favor of this. And I welcome any questions.
Mr. Lang, would you like to step forward? For 2 minutes, please.
Hello again, Alan Lang, Anne Arundel County. I concur with all the folk who have spoken before me and those who spoke on this issue last year. I took an approach to why hasn't this bill passed before. I looked at last year, the Attorney General, the ACLU, ARC, Common Cause, People in the Go of Maryland, and the Maryland Development Disabilities Council all testified against similar bill. And they all claimed a driver's license or other photo ID would discriminate against the poor, the elderly, people of color, or the disabled, as they are not as likely to have such ID, and obtaining such ID would be costly and time consuming. They often claim studies show such and such, but rarely footnote any actual study. And the few that do, they list studies ranging all the way back to 2008. The latest I saw was 2018, and none of them were Maryland specific. Supporting witnesses from last year and this year have provided more recent studies that counter these arguments, but for some reason, it doesn't seem to sway your opinion as to why we should change and adopt voter ID. Current federal law requires that new registrants to vote must provide their Maryland driver's license number, MVA ID card number, or the last 4 digits of their social security number. I believe this has been in effect since the 90s. Thus, the number of voters who registered prior to the law change have been dwindling, making some of the objections of these groups be less and less compelling. Perhaps in conjunction with this, the state should create a program to look at these people who don't have the ID and come up with some way to provide the ID to these people. For example, the Assembly could work on a program whereby the MVA sends out its mobile units to areas where large numbers of poor, elderly, people of color, and disabled live, so they can obtain their licenses or MVA ID cards. And thus, besides being able to vote with this, they also get the advantages of having a license to fly, to do all these other things, even to enter a building like this.
Thank you.
They could do all this. Thank you.
Thank you. Miss Fink? Get somebody to step back. We're missing a chair up there. We'll fix that. It's okay.
Short. So. Hi, I'm Nelda Fink again from Millersville, Maryland Committee. Thank you for this opportunity to improve our elections. Again, I caution with using just the driver's license or the Maryland state ID, and Maryland MVA does issue an ID that is not just a driver's license. When establishing the voter's ID, the judge must also verify that the driver's license being used or the ID being used is a federally compliant real ID. And this needs to be annotated in the statute wording. If it is not, then the voter's integrity, if it's not that kind of an ID, then the voter's integrity should be questioned. Maryland issues driver's license to immigrants, but according to the MVA documentation, it will be a non-compliant card. Again, I don't know what that looks like. The judge needs to know. The judge needs to know the difference and stop any voting of an individual who does not have the real ID. This provides a really great check and balance on the registration as well, so that we can determine now that the voter registration is accurate, as well as the actual vote. And now I'm going to get into some of the details, but utilizing or using a utility bill does not establish ID, and a utility bill does not establish residence. So the use of a utility bill as part of the wording in the statute, I think, should be removed. No voting should be permitted if the identification cannot be established, not even a provisional ballot. because eventually the provisional ballot may be counted as mine was back in 2020. Paragraph D should completely be removed from the statute, and this is supported by Rule 16201, paragraph A13, as well as one where it is being added that a person may not willfully or knowingly vote or attempt to vote under a false form of identification. And I was just going to get into one more detail, and that is the impersonation. If they try to vote without having the proper ID, then they are in fact impersonating a voter. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have one more signed up virtually. Jay in favor, Jay Kaminsky, please, for 2 minutes.
Hi, I'm Jay Kaminsky from Frederick County, Maryland, and I'm in agreement with the people that have testified before me. I'll just add that the passage of Bill 192 would go a long way towards healing divisions in Maryland's electorate by assuring that someone who attempts to vote is in fact the same person listed on the registration list. For many years, Marylanders and other citizens of USA have been debating the accuracy of our voting systems. Many feel that the voting systems are functioning as intended, while others believe that the system makes it too easy for nefarious actors to introduce fraudulent votes. By ensuring that the person who tries to vote is actually eligible to vote, House Bill 192 would enhance the accuracy and integrity of the voting system in Maryland. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from any members of the committee? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the hearing on House Bill 192. Delegate Long, House Bill 202.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, Delegate Bob Long, I'm here to testify on, hold on for a second. My throat's going wrong way. HB, wait a minute, where we go? Pardon me for a minute. 202. We've presented this bill several times, and we actually asked for signature witness on the ballot before it could be opened. I'm willing to amend this if we can have signature verification done once the ballot's cast. We have the technology. We've seen it in place. Just recently, Governor Hogan submitted, I believe, over 10,000 signatures to be able to run for an office. So the technology is there to verify a signature. That's all we want, is to make sure whoever's signing that ballot, placing that ballot, is the one that signs it. And that's what this bill, we're presenting this bill for. Either that or have a signature on the front. We just want to make sure the person is presenting the ballot is the right person. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lang, there's an extra seat. If you want to step up.
Just you want me to go first, you want to go down there.
But whoever else wants to go next, thank you.
Hello again, it's David Morseberger, Davidsonville, Maryland. I came across the following when reviewing Maryland election laws. It's basically content and process of petitions, verification of signatures. And inside of that, to summarize, it says election authorities shall proceed to verify the signatures. And then another part says to ensure that the name of the individual who signed a petition is listed as a registered voter. So therefore, when you look at that, based on the statute in the state of Maryland, believes that the accuracy of petitions is more important than the accuracy of elections. Can I say that again? The accuracy of petitions is more important than the accuracy of elections. This seems to be backwards to me. I don't know about you all, but elections are sacred to our republic. I have asked the state and local board of elections about verifying signatures, and their response always, we cannot because it's not the law. Personally, I think we must continually work to make our elections, sure our elections are the most accurate component of our government, besides maybe the budget, but we should have some of the same controls and reconciliation process that you do have in budget, where everything that we do should reconcile. The voter who got the ballot is the voter who signed the ballot, is the voter who cast the ballot, is a reconciliation statement that we should have in mail-in voters. So we must implement election accuracy mindset in signature verification of the mail-in ballot envelopes received is a big step in that direction. So I plead with you again to please vote in favor of HB 202. And I welcome any questions.
Mail-in voting already presents an issue with chain of custody, and chain of custody is a bedrock of secure elections. Signature verification is an essential step to guaranteeing the person who voted is the person that they say they are. In a recent study, 20% of Americans admitted to voting for someone else. Signature verification would set up a necessary backstop to this happening. I've already mentioned our real life experience canvassing, finding voters who, when they looked on the rolls, noticed that someone had voted in their stead. Signature verification would have prevented that from happening. We are in a crisis of confidence right now. 67% of voters do not trust our elections. We have an opportunity to change that. Let's put every effort into showing the Marylanders we are serious and sincere in wanting to secure accurate elections. We can all agree that we only want legal votes to count. With signature verification, we can help voters trust that everyone voting is who they say they are, while at the same time improving election administration. We urge a favorable vote for HB 202.
Again, Ella Ennis for the Maryland Federation Republican Women. We appreciate and support House Bill 202 because it's very important that every vote be the vote of a valid registered voter. This bill requires the absentee ballot envelope be signed by the voter and a witness, and that there is an exception and that it be verified, and once it reaches the Board of Elections, that it is the voter's signature as shown on the voter's record. The bill provides an exception for not needing the witness signature if it's a military personnel or their family overseas. But without the voter's signature and the signature verification on the absentee ballots, a ballot could be filled out by another person and the valid voter be denied their right to vote. Ballots can be lost or stolen from mailboxes, and particularly in multifamily housing or group home facilities or nursing homes. Verification of the voter's signature on their absentee ballot return envelope is an important safeguard to be sure that the votes are counted are the votes of the voter. If we want more people to be to vote and it would have confidence in our election systems and their results, then we need to make sure that the voting system is safe. And this is a safeguard that would be helpful. And we urge your favorable report.
Alan Lang, Anne Arundel County. I'll keep it short because everyone's pretty much said what I was going to say. There's a perception among the populace that people are obtaining blank absentee ballots intended for registered voters and voting as if they were the registered voter. As long as there is only a requirement to have a signature on the ballot without matching it to the voter registration, that perception that cheating can occur will remain. To help combat that perception and make the people believe that we have fair and honest elections, I urge you to support this bill.
Thank you. Is Dave Sachs here? Dave, if someone could let him, take a seat and come on up.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak here today. This is the first time I've done something like this. I support this bill, and here's why, please. I have voted in every single election since I became of age, going back to 1984. It was important to my dad that I do so, and it was important to me. I study the issues and I research the candidates. I voted for lots of candidates who didn't win, and that's okay. I got over it. The results were fair and square. But 2020 was different. I've done my research and learned that there was plenty of actual cheating regarding mail-in ballots. Not everyone's news channel of choice shared these stories, but the truth is they were very real. For the first time in my life, I felt like my vote did not matter, and that was not a good feeling. Requiring a signature and verification on mail-in and absentee ballots no more suppresses the vote than a bank requiring me to sign my paycheck suppresses my salary. It's just good common sense. Maybe I'm being idealistic, but it can't be a good feeling to look yourself in the mirror knowing that you had to cheat to win. I mean, winning is great and all, but it's hollow if it isn't earned in the proper way. If your policies and your candidates are the best, you will win without needing to cheat. As my dad used to say, cheaters never win, and winners never cheat. Let's please get to a place where only legal and legitimate voters decide our elections here in Maryland. Faith in our election process and trust in the election results are no small things. As I've learned all throughout my life, doing the right thing is always the right thing to do. Thank you for letting a little nothing like me speak here today. I think my dad is smiling right now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Fink, do you want to come up? And then Delegate Long, you have one person virtually.
Again, Nelda Fink from Millersville, Maryland, and thank you again for the opportunity to improve our elections. While I am in favor of Bill HB 202, I believe it is a weak bill and needs more detail. So here I am again with the details. What does verification really mean? I agree with the absentee ballots need to be signed and the signature needs to be verified. However, who is qualified to perform the verification? Any scribbles on that ballot could be verified as a valid signature, which is not proving that the person sending in the ballot was in fact the voter whose name appears on the ballot. These details need to be in the bill and they need to be in the statutes. What needs to be done is to have a signature to compare it to, just like banks require a signature card on file for a checking account. So the signature verification needs to be officially done by the voter, sending in a copy of their Maryland driver's license or some Maryland ID. Again, the judge needs to verify that the driver's license or the ID is a real ID, and then verify the signatures both match. The verification is now twofold. First, it verifies that the ballot is from a Maryland citizen. And if if it is not a real ID, then this person is again attempting to impersonate a Maryland citizen under 16201 and should be prosecuted. Second, it allows the judge to actually verify that the signatures match, verifying that the ballot is from the voter attempting to vote. And the wording of the bill should indicate what the outcome of the individual and the ballot should be if the verification process fails, as HB 192 does provide some of those wordings. So with these amendments, I request a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Kaminsky for 2 minutes, please.
I'm very much in favor of this bill 202, and I'm in agreement with the previous testimony, especially validating the signature with something on file. While it's understandable that Maryland seeks to make it as convenient as possible for residents to vote, this convenience must be accompanied by basic safeguards to ensure public confidence and election integrity, as most other states have recognized. As some of you may be aware, Maryland is currently only one of a handful of states that do not require signature verification, witness notarization, or inclusion of a copy of physical ID with the mail-in ballots. Marylanders deserve a system that makes it easy to vote, but hard to cheat. At this time, it is easy to vote, but also very hard, easy to cheat. Requiring signature verification would put any additional obstacles in the voter's path and would be relatively simple for our Board of Election to implement, particularly considering how far AI and machine learning tools have recently come. As 31 states have already implemented some method of signature verification, there is plenty of model legislation to choose from, after which Maryland can draw their own specifications on how to get this done. Only thing I would add, I would agree with someone else that testified that latest Rasmussen poll identified 20% of voters that said they either voted on someone else's behalf, a family member, a neighbor, or knows someone who voted on someone else's behalf. I canvassed hundreds, literally thousands of doors in the last election cycle, and I had a neighbor come over and bring me 3 sets of ballots and said I could have voted them all one way. And I just don't think that's right. Thank you for letting me share.
Thank you very much. Committee, any questions for any of the witnesses? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the hearing on House Bill 202. Delegate Long, bring it home with 220.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair. I saved it all up for today. HB 220, it's a homestead property tax credit calculation for first-time home buyers. We've heard here today how important it is for people that's wanting to buy the first home, how hard it is to come up with the money. One of the biggest part of that is having to come up with property taxes each and every month. If that house doesn't sell, the homestead property tax is not going to change. If it's as of today, if they sell the house, the value will go up according to the sales price. What I would like to do is lock it into what it is today, give the new buyers a chance to move in, and then the assessed value will go up on a yearly basis. Especially now with property values going up, we've heard as much as 30%. This would help home buyers get into the market. I know that I was reading some of the testimony that they felt that this would cost the state, would cost money. And I don't believe it will, because right now, if people can't afford to buy a house, they're not buying a house. At least this would generate some revenue to get people into a new home. I've been in real estate for over 40 years. I've never seen a market like it is right now. People are struggling to come up with a down payment and to have that monthly payment each month. It would not only do that, but it would give them more buying power, because if taxes were froze for that year that you bought it, it would give them more buying power because they wouldn't have to qualify for a higher loan. And like I said, I did read through some of the testimony, and this is enabling legislation. Each county, each jurisdiction could use this or not. I think right now, I don't have no data to prove it, but I know the governor's actually, trying to provide affordable housing. I want to do the same thing, maybe coming at it a little different way. It's not going to cost taxpayers no money. And for that, I would thank you, and I would ask for a favorable vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Delegate Long? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Delegate Long. There are 3 individuals signed up to testify unfavorably: Joshua Greenberg, Director Higgs. I don't know if you're both coming up, and Kevin Canale.
All right, I'm going to dance as I go away.
And Director Higgs, would you like to go first?
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Michael Higgs, and I am the Director of the Department of Assessments and Taxation, here to speak in opposition to House Bill 220. This bill would enable a first-time homebuyer in the state of Maryland to receive the homestead property tax credit for a newly purchased home through the use of a homestead credit carryover amount. If the proposed legislation were to be enacted, it would take effect June 1st, 2024, and be applied to all taxable years beginning June 30th, 2024. While the department appreciates the intent of the proposed legislation, ESTAT advises that it would be impossible to implement this new legislation by the timeline suggested in this bill, as it would require significant updates to the department's real property database and systems. ESTAT's vendor typically performs updates due to new legislation at a reduced cost. However, it may require months of study for the necessary changes to be made before an accurate timeline could even be developed. The department would incur additional costs if it attempted to speed up this timeline, although implementation does depend on jurisdictions first authorizing this program. To administer, the department would require first-time homebuyers to submit certain documents filed at closing along with their homestead tax credit application. In addition, STAT could incur significant unknown computer programming costs to reprogram its tax system to allow for the carryover of the homestead property tax credit from one homeowner to another, excuse me. Thank you, and I'm looking forward to answering any questions you might have.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Kevin Canale here on behalf of the Maryland Association of Counties in opposition to the bill. I appreciate the intent behind the bill. I certainly do. I can tell you MACO is going to be in other committees supporting affordable housing bills. We don't feel this is the way to go. This is a bill that would subvert the main policy goal of a very successful and longstanding program. And the goal is to keep people in their homes after the time of purchase, to maintain stability after the time of purchase. Many counties have gone even further than the state requires. So the state requires you to have a 10% cap. Most counties actually go below that. So they even go further than the state does right now. If this bill were to pass, I think that this year's fiscal note says 3 to 10 million. It's important to note that these fiscal notes are based on market conditions for 1 year. So we've seen a fiscal note, I think in 2018 on this bill, that was $40 million per year. So it is real money, and it's real money that can't go to schools, public safety, public health, roadway maintenance, all the other things that counties do each and every day. So again, certainly appreciate the intent of the bill. Right church, wrong pew in our opinion, and we'd ask for an unfavorable report.
Any questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. That concludes the hearing on House Bill 222. Delegate Williams, come on up. House Bill 641. And whomever you would like to bring up with you can come on up too. You have Monica Wiley. I don't see Andy Cole. Oh, there you are.
And let me see who else is. I don't know if there's anyone else here, Madam Chair, favorable.
Sharon Manecki is here. She's favorable with amendment.
Yeah.
Do you mind if she comes up?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Ms. Manecki, can you come on up? My constituents.
Okay. Good afternoon, Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair Wilkins, and the members of the House Ways and Means Committee. I am Delegate Nicole Williams, testifying in favor of House Bill 641, also known as the election law curbside voting. This bill is actually a pilot bill in a lot of ways because this is a program to see how curbside voting will work here in the state of Maryland, which is why this bill is limited to only one jurisdiction per county. This is my 5th time, I think, introducing this bill, so I'm hoping the 5th time is the charm. But this bill will establish that there is only this is not an emergency bill and will allow time for the local board of elections as well as the state board of elections to implement the processes and procedures to see how this would work. And each local board would make the determination within their respective jurisdiction as to where that one proper location will be located within their respective jurisdiction. These designated areas must be determined at least 6 months in advance and, like I said, are subject to approval by the state board. And this would expand access to voting for individuals who have mobility limitations, but still wish to vote in person. There are 27 bipartisan states, plus the District of Columbia, that already require or allow curbside voting. Each election cycle, some individuals in Maryland are forced to overcome physical hardships in order to exercise their right to vote. And some may decide not to participate at all due to the struggle that in-person voting would cause them, and if mail-by voting is not available easily for them. And so therefore, if a voter fails to submit with mail-in voting, fails to submit the requested form, they do have to physically go either during early vote on election day. And so this just simply provides another option for individuals. During the 2020 election, with the usage of absentee ballots, 62% of persons with disabilities voted. Additional methods may increase this number greatly for future elections. And approximately 11% of the entire population here in Maryland has some type of cognitive, hearing, vision, or ambulatory disability, which can impact their ability to contribute to voting here in the state of Maryland. Curbside voting is effective for individuals who are physically unable to go inside and vote, and this bill helps people comfortably vote without unnecessary stressors. This can also assist individuals who are pregnant, elderly individuals, and individuals with life-threatening diseases who do not see going inside a crowded building or standing in long lines as a safe option for them. Passing this legislation will allow all individuals to exercise their right to vote in person and significantly contribute to election outcomes in our state. Other states have been able to allow this type of voting safely and securely, such as Wisconsin, North Carolina, and even our neighbors in Virginia. These individuals who wish to vote are citizens here in Maryland and deserve the right to vote. And this bill will encourage all individuals to perform their civic duty. And so for these reasons, I urge this committee to give a favorable report to House Bill 641. Thank you.
Is the mic on? Oh, it is. I hear my voice. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the Ways and Means Committee. I am Monica Wiley, and I am now a resident of Maryland with a physical disability. I will not state everything that I have written in what I submitted in my testimony because you all have it, but I want to stress a few of the things I want to mention here. One is, as I stated, I'm a person with a physical disability. It was caused by a drunk driver that killed my entire family at the age of 9. I was a former voter in Virginia, so I am one of those John Lewis individuals that fought for curbside voting in Virginia. I am now a resident of Maryland, and I have to be honest and say to you that when I voted for the gubernatorial race, I found it to be very challenging and some extreme stressors on my body physically, and that should not be the case for anyone. I've heard a couple of election judges say, oh, well, you don't have to come and vote in person, just submit an absentee vote. Well, the disability community and the history of disability rights was about fighting for inclusion and equity so that like the rest of our peers will be able to vote in person like everyone else. And we should have that same fairness and opportunity without being relegated to voting absentee or mailing in our ballot. One of the things that we enjoy is being in the community and being among our peers and other members of society that are able to participate like everyone else. And so I urge this committee, before I say I urge this committee, I want to also mention that the former Congressman Tony Coelho, who's author of the ADA and is a mentor of mine, has supported this bill for years now when we mention it and asked for the delegate to introduce it. And so while he was unable to submit a written report, he said to me, Monica, please make sure that I urge this committee to vote in favor of HB 641. And I myself urge this committee to do the same. Thank you very much.
Please tell me I don't have to go after her. Good afternoon, Chair Atterbury and members of the committee. My name is Andy Culp, and I'm the Executive Director of the ARC Maryland. And I really, really want to say just ditto to all of those fantastic words. This has been something that we've been wanting for a number of years now for the people that we support through the ARC Maryland. You have my written testimony, and in there is a story from one of our Governmental Affairs Committee members who works for the Independent Living Center in Montgomery County, and and her difficulties in being able to get out and vote in person, and just how important that is to a person with disabilities. So Just in closing, we would urge the committee to return a favorable report on House Bill 641. Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Madam Vice Chair, I'm Sharon Minneke, Chairman of the Legislative Division of the National Federation of the Blind of Maryland. For years, we opposed this bill. And now I'm happy to say that we are for it because it gives the voter the chance to choose ballot marking device or paper. And in your briefing that you had on January 30th, the legislative service person said that it was done in Texas. So you finally got it right. But you forgot the details. The devil is always in the details. You know, you have it all outlined, what you do if you vote on paper and how you bring it in and how you print it and this and that and the other thing. Put some of those devices, put some of those details rather in for the ballot marking device because civil rights needs to be explained and verified. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Delegate Griffith?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Delegate, for bringing this bill. Just one small technical question. So there were some significant impacts by the drop boxes on electioneering and that the radius around being able to electioneer. How would this impact that based upon where the location of this would be?
Yeah, so like I said earlier, the local board of elections will determine where on the election site that this would take place. Keeping in mind, yes, those distance parameters with regards to the front of the building and the drop boxes. And that is, I think, included in the bill that those distances do have to continue to be maintained, but they would determine, the local boards would determine that specific location.
I guess my question is like, so would there be somebody sitting outside all day waiting for somebody to show up? Would they be called upon? Would that radius only count when somebody's sitting out there and not when they're not sitting out there? Like I'm just trying to.
Yeah, no, I don't think that someone necessarily has to sit out there all day, whether it's in the sun, the rain, the snow, the sleet, or the shine. But there would be determining with the regulations that would be implemented if this were to pass, really how the person would call in to let the election judges know that there's someone outside seeking to exercise this option.
Well, I guess the question I'm just trying to dive into, and I'm sorry, just for clarification's sake, the 150-foot radius, would that apply?
That will stay intact.
Oh, but that would only be when someone is, literally casting the ballot out front of the voting location. Would it be that spot be designated at all times? I mean, how would that work?
The radius would stay the same as it currently is. So that's not going to.
So this would not impact the current rate. Okay.
Yes.
Understood. Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you. We have two folks signed up unfavorably, and then there's someone virtually just for information. So if Mr. Morrisberger and Mr. Lang could come forward for 2 minutes, please.
Okay. I'm David Morrisberger from Davidsville, Maryland. First, it's going to be really hard to testify kind of after the others. I appreciate the folks who testified here today and understand their hardships and passionate testimony, as my mother has been disabled since I was a young boy. As a past chief judge, we did everything within our control to help and make sure disabled voters vote, to include going to the front of the line and providing voting assistance as following the procedures that are, we are trained as part of the voting, the training that we receive as judges. Nobody was turned away. No other voter in line had an issue with us providing help. to include going to the front of the line or anything that we did. I'm gonna go back to what I talked about earlier about we need to focus kind of and provide that balance. The bill talks about maximizing voter participation. Kind of, as I mentioned, also mentioned earlier, as a UMC engineer, we are taught that you must take all aspects into account when determining what we call the global optimum, and always be concerned about the local optimals. So this includes balancing voter accuracy, voter security, voter participation, and citizens' confidence. So we need to take all into account. And for that reason, and the reasons for how we acted as a judge, how we implemented the polling place, you know, I'm not in favor of this bill, as I believe, like my mother, she has never had an issue. Well, she had an issue, but she always went ahead and voted in person with support that was provided by the election judges in there. So please vote against HB 41. Thank you.
Hello again, Alan Lang, Anne Arundel County, Pasadena. My concerns is this, can this be done in a cost-effective and secure manner? There was no fiscal impact study for this bill. If one receives a ballot by mail, prepares it, and drives to or takes public transportation to a drop box, isn't this essentially curbside voting? What is the advantage to the voter of being checked in by a judge outside a polling place and submitting their ballot and equipment outside the polling place versus entering the polling place and doing these tasks? In addition, the boards are tasked with having one curbside voting place. In selecting this site, they must consider accessibility of the location to historically disenfranchised communities, an undefined term, the proximity of dense concentration of voters, accessibility of public transportation, which is not available in many rural areas of the state, and using community centers. These may be conflicting choices, and the bill gives no input as to which factors are the most important. This bill seems to be a solution in search of a problem primarily solvable by obtaining an absentee ballot in the mail and then traveling to a polling place to drop it off. You're still voting in person. Not going inside means you're not voting like everybody else. So if that's your goal, I don't see how this accomplishes it. Please vote against HB 0641.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Delegate Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question of either one of the opponents to the legislation. Have you had the opportunity to visit in person or virtually a curbside voting site, since this is offered in other jurisdictions within the DMV?
Not me.
I have visited Virginia voting sites and I did not see a curbside voting, so no, I have not.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you both. We have one person virtually. Linda Cohn for 2 minutes, please.
Okay, I'm on now. Thank you. My name is Linda Cohn. I'm speaking here today on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Maryland. I've worked as an election judge. I worked as a chief judge, number of elections. And when I read this bill, it reminded me of an experience I had. It was 2016. It was the last day of early voting. It was the evening. It was fall. And the lines were snaking all over the place. There was this really long line to get to the poll books and check in. And then once you got through that line, there was another really long line that you stood in to get to the voting booths. And they were snaking all over the place. And I was watching the line and making sure those lines didn't cross. People had to be in the right lane and those lines didn't cross, because that would have been real mess. And I saw a woman come in and she was going past the lines and trying to walk in. And so I approached her to see what was going on. She was very weak. She was pale. She was leaning heavily on a walker. She was struggling. And there was somebody with her. I don't know who it was. Somebody there was with her. And he said she had just gotten discharged from the hospital and she needed to vote then. but the lines were impossible for her. And when I read this bill, I thought of this woman back in 2016. I remembered that story. My guess is she probably didn't request an absentee ballot ahead of time because she assumed she would just go and vote in person. But here she was just out of the hospital and trying to cast a ballot. And so when I read HB 641, it really came to life for me. The League has offered an information-only statement on this, not because we don't think curbside voting could help some voters participate, but rather for us, there were still too many questions about how it would work in practice in Maryland. Regardless of how people vote, in person, maybe curbside, mail, every voter should have the same protections and assurances that every vote has. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. And that concludes the hearing on House Bill 641, House Bill 491, Delegate Fair, and would you like Director Higgs and Kevin Kennelly to come on up?
Thank you, Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair Wilkins, and esteemed members of the Ways and Means Committee. For the record, I am Delegate Chris Fair presenting House Bill 491. Public policy around technology is always rife with interesting debate. Balancing the positive impacts of technology with the potential harm that abuse of technology is a worthwhile discussion for our legislative body, both today and in the future. Today, HB 491 seeks to highlight a way we as a body can empower our government agencies to conduct their business, bring greater parity between real property owners in Maryland, and ensure that we are effectively and fairly following our state constitution. As required by the Maryland Constitution, each property in Maryland will be assessed every 3 years. The process of well over 2 million properties in Maryland creates great strain on a sometimes dwindling resources at the State Department of Assessment and Taxation. Combined with appeals processes and following updated state legislative initiatives, can easily cause unmanageable challenges for the necessary resources and bandwidth at the department. HB 491 expands on an existing program that exists in numerous counties. It allows for SSTAT to harness technology through geographic and photographic imagery to assess properties in real time. This guarantees that each property gets a current, fair, and balanced assessment that does not include having to burden the homeowner by the assessor being forced to show up at your property. Additionally, the use of oblique aerial photography, which means photography at various axial angles, allows assessors to properly measure buildings without having to be physically on site. Additionally, the storage provision of this bill will help create and maintain an invaluable resource for both SSTAT and our residents. In real time, SSTAT will be able to provide guidance and imagery around their current assessment process and be able to better communicate the reasoning for their assessment value with a resident. I urge the Ways and Means Committee to give our employees at SSTAT the tools they need to do their work and use technology as a benefit to all of us. I urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Michael Higgs, and I am the Director of the Department of Assessments and Taxation. House Bill 491 would help the department to acquire state-of-the-art oblique aerial photographic imagery to generate more accurate real property assessments. Emerging technologies have provided the department with opportunities to continue to do more with less, while delivering world-class services to the people of Maryland. Oblique aerial photography uses top-angle images taken by plane for accurate measurements of properties without the need for assessors to physically inspect that property. In a study conducted by the department, it was found that the use of this technology could uncover an additional $1.4 billion in additional assessable base that had previously not been identified by state or local authorities. Use of this technology would generate more than $14 million annually in additional revenue for counties across the state. Oblique aerial technology can, on average, perform the work in 1 hour that would normally take an assessor 3 hours to complete. The time savings would free up assessors to focus on more complicated assessments, assessment appeals, and portions of the state that are more densely populated with properties and have a higher need for personal attention than others. House Bill 491 strengthens the department's efforts to modernize and find more efficient methods of conducting assessments and deliver accurate information to our county partners. And I'd also like to add that once SDAT acquires the imagery, it's also made available to our partners at other government agencies, such as police and DNR and environment and MDOT. So several agencies utilize this imagery when SDAT gets it now, and we're going to be sharing that with everyone once we get the entire state covered.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Kevin Canale here on behalf of the Maryland Association of Counties in support of the bill. You'll see support with amendment. We had some questions about the cost. We've cleared that up, that we're completely comfortable with the fiscal note. The one thing, and me too to everything Director Higgs just said and Delegate Fair, the one thing that seemed a little bit odd to us in the back of the bill was the process with DGS in acquiring the equipment and then coming up with some cost sharing plan. Just stood out as that might be a little bit difficult to implement. So we just wanted to flag that, and we're happy to have conversations around how to make that more clear. But generally, we think this is a great idea. Embracing this technology makes a ton of sense. We know that SDAT does not have the number of assessors it needs to go out and make sure that their assessments are fair and accurate. They do a great job, but they don't have enough folks to actually physically go out and do this. This is a no-brainer to us. We think this is a great idea. The technology is there. There's proper oversight, and we'd ask for a favorable report with just a continuing conversation about the back end of the bill and how that would work through DGS.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Delegate Attar?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Delegate. You mentioned that a few jurisdictions are already doing this. Are you referring to the pilot program for Anne Arundel and Frederick?
Yeah, so, oh, sorry. So I do have a list here. There you go. So in addition to the pilot program that Anne Arundel and Frederick are doing, other counties are also already utilizing this technology, and those include Hartford County, Montgomery County, Howard County, Prince George's County, Calvert County, Wacomico County, and Baltimore City as well, in addition to Anne Arundel and Frederick.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Delegate Roberts?
Oh, hi, thank you. Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. I was looking at the fiscal note and I saw that it doesn't provide, says no small business effect. How could that be if you're going to be, doing procurement?
So the state has a master contract for all of their GIS services, and that includes aerial photography. And there's already a vendor on the master contract. So it's not a procurement issue. It's just buying it off of the master contract.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Delegate Young?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm just looking at this fiscal and also hearing what you said about the efficiency that you're finding in the agency. It seems to me that this would not necessarily be net negative, but net positive on the bottom line. Is that correct?
That would be my assessment. I think that's certainly from the director's comments. As you know, the fiscal note can't include an actual analysis. It instead just studies what the upfront cost is.
So the state receives approximately 10% of property tax revenues. The counties receive approximately 9% or 90%. So the counties are going to be receiving the bulk of the revenue generated from this expenditure. So for the state, it's not going to be necessarily a net positive dollar for dollar. But the state of Maryland as a whole, when you look at the counties as well, it's going to be a very big net positive for the state. And our county partners.
I mean, I think that I was just on it. 1.25 million in assessable base increases for Anne Arundel County, which includes potentially 1.4 million that will come to state coffers just from what they are doing. So, I mean, I just wanted to lift it up for the record that, it seems like there's efficiencies with regard to time savings and thus salary and cost savings from the agency standpoint. But then my assessment, at least cursory, is that it would be net positive because if Anne Arundel County is able to potentially net 1.4 million just there, scaling it would be very positive. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the hearing on House Bill 491. Final bill, Delegate Fair, House Bill 471.
A natural segue bill here from topics of geographical aerial imaging to post-election procedures.
Would you like Mr. Demarinis to come up?
Please, thank you. And anybody else who's signed up favorable. Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair Wilkins, and esteemed members of the Ways and Means Committee. For the record, I'm Delegate Chris Fair presenting House Bill 471. In 2022, the United States Congress did something truly extraordinary. They passed a meaningful bipartisan piece of legislation. Recognizing the gaps and dangers in post-election procedures during the 2020 presidential election, a bipartisan group of legislators crafted and passed the Election Count Reform Act, commonly referred to as the ECRA. We are here today because the ECRA requires us to change some of the procedures by which we count our votes. With the deepest gratitude to Jared Demarinis at the State Board of Elections, the Campaign Legal Center, Common Cause Maryland, and Ways and Means resident rockstar Stan Ward, we have carefully made precision updates to the presidential post-election procedure that will better align us with the federally mandated deadlines and procedures outlined in the ECRA. A quick overview of how we have streamlined that process. First, the legislation shortens the time frame from 35 days to 30 days for counties to submit their results. Second, the Board of State Canvassers, comprising of Maryland's Attorney General, Secretary of State, Chief Clerk of the Maryland Supreme Court, State Treasurer, and Comptroller, or their appointed Chief Deputy, will be the only certifying body for all primary and general elections within 1 day of the county certification. Third, the State Board Administrator will transmit those results to the governor within 3 days, who will ascertain and then issue a certificate of the certified electors to transmit to Congress. Secondly, transparency is paramount to this bill. If during the process there are questionable acts by either the local election agency or a reason for concerns with a Board of State Canvasser members' actions, the bill is also prescriptive as to when and how a member can raise that objection. Equally important, if these highest level members of the Board of State Canvassers identify a statement at a local election agency that is inaccurate, they may reject that local election agency statement and request an accurate statement. While this will likely never be necessary, this level of transparency ensures the public's confidence that our election process is open, free, and fair. Finally, I will note a small error has been corrected through an amendment. On page 4, line 34, the bill should read 3 days, not 30 days. With that amendment, I encourage my colleagues at the Ways and Means Committee to issue a favorable report. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I'm just here to answer questions. Yes, it has to be passed because we have to comply with federal law. So.
Okay.
I move favorable.
Exactly.
Any
However, I
questions?
do like 30 days to for those purposes.
Okay, we do have 2 folks signed up unfavorable. So if you 2 would like to step back, there are no
Sure.
questions. And Mr. Lang and Mr. Morrisberger for 2 minutes, please.
This is David Morrisberger, Davidsville, and mine's more of a favorable with an amendment. And so I was too quick on the website. So in the one section 4, it says the state board determines based on clear and convincing evidence that a statement by a board of canvassers is inaccurate, reject the statement and ascertain the accurate election results. Problem there is, I think it's the use of the word ascertain, because if you go with thesaurus, one of the uses of ascertain is fix. So I don't think that this should be interpreted as fix the accurate election result. I think it means find. It actually means more of a find versus a fix. So I think allowing the State Board of Election to kind of give the appearance of overturning and fixing an election is not something that is going to, I think, increase voter confidence and may actually do the opposite. So it's more of a favorable with an amendment. Thank you.
Alan Lang, Anne Arundel County, Pasadena. I share similar concerns with Dave with the statement ascertain accurate election results. Listening to the explain it sounded different from the way it reads. So my concern is what does ascertain accurate election results mean? And also they talked about full disclosure and transparency. It doesn't describe how they ascertained whatever they're ascertaining. So, because later on it says the Board of State Canvassers shall prepare and transmit to the state board a distinct written statement of the reason for the determination, including the evidence on which the determination was based, but again, doesn't require them to describe how they fixed whatever was wrong. Aside from that, so maybe I'll be like Dave, that it's accept with an amendment instead of a rejection. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you.
And you must pass it according to Jared.
And that concludes the hearing on House Bill 471. Committee, that concludes our hearings for today. Do any subcommittee chairs have any announcements? Okay, subcommittee backroom folks, I will see you in 10 minutes in the conference room, please. Thank you.
Oh, I know. Oh, that's okay. And then the next. Yeah, you know that. All I did.